Hey everybody, Simon Dixon here. You recently may have heard me losing my shit on a few X spaces, and the videos kind of made their way. I love it on X when people start creating memes and cartoons and pull out clips and everything. I've been sharing those because I try to take it in good humor, even though the subject is a real red line for me, and I don't find it a subject to laugh about. Um, you know, the genocide in Gaza, the Holocaust that's happening right now, the mass starvation campaign that the entire world has now recognized, with the exception of America. And even Trump just came out and said the starvation is awful. Obviously, the usual lies and propaganda and spin is applied to it that we're so used to right now in covering up for the genocide that's happening. And as you know, I always talk about the hierarchy of structure in the proof of weapons network. Many people believe that Israel controls America because of many of the blackmail operations like Jeffrey Epstein. And Jeffrey Epstein, his handler, was Ghislaine Maxwell. And Ghislaine Maxwell was the daughter of Robert Maxwell, who was a Mossad super agent. But I've covered this, and you can check out my other blogs on Trump's connection to Epstein using Ryan Dawson's work, and answering the question of, what's going on there. I've got a couple of blogs on that topic with all the further reading that you may need if you want to dive into that topic. But the point is that when you look at the real structure, my personal belief is that Israel is simply an American colony with plausible deniability, whereby whenever the crimes against humanity that American corporations like Lockheed Martin, General Dynamic, Raytheon, Palantir, and many other of the companies that receive the feeder Silicon Valley companies like Google, Meta, basically there is a complex structure that occurs between Silicon Valley companies that are funded by divisions of the CIA venture arm, and they get military technology. And often, when the technology is too controversial or would not fly within some of the rules within America, you feed it out to a technology company within Israel, and then they can beta test it in the Middle East, like genocide as a service in Gaza, occupation as a service in West Bank, and things like integration with drones in Ukraine, and many of the surveillance technology that's happening across the European Union, UK, including crowd control in Saudi Arabia and various other technologies that are beta tested. And then when they would be complete at risk of being sued under the US legal system, you can sell them via Israel. And then if these technologies work out, they're gobbled up and acquired back into the US, where companies like Google and Meta and some of the large military companies end up acquiring. And so it acts as like a laundering and feeder operation. But the profits end up in US stocks at the end of the day. The money doesn't stay within Israel. And when you need plausible deniability, you get to, rather than those military companies being sued, they are US corporations, and they kind of have a bit of a story. So if everything goes wrong, America and Europe, as it historically has done, you can weaponize religion to recruit an army in Israel through IDF. They have to engage in the ethnic cleansing and genocide of Palestinians. There is forced conscription where you have to join the IDF. And you can use, billionaires, maybe wealthy billionaires in America, can fund organizations like AIPAC, and then you have military lobbying and banking lobbying, and you have this complex mechanism for controlling Congress, for controlling Senate, and when needed, maybe even control over judicial through these blackmail operations, and then, even to the extreme of human trafficking, weapons trafficking, drug trafficking, and even sexual blackmail operations, as is being covered up right now. And so that's the relationship as I see it from within the Proof of Weapons network. And Mossad, CIA, and MI6 are deeply connected in these operations. And obviously, when you're dealing with criminal organizations, because we've often covered the history of the CIA when it came from Operation Paperclip, which was a operation with Nazi Germany through Alan Dulles, who was also connected to the Bank for International Settlements that funded Nazi Germany. And there was a merger and partnership as a result of that with the Italian mafia, and then the Jewish mob as well, and the Jewish mafia. And when I say Jewish mafia, people try and misquote that as if I'm talking about all Jews. Well, you've seen my blog where I covered debunking the myths of do all Jews rule the world? And so they try to play the anti-Semitic card. And you'll notice that there are various operations. If you read Operation Mockingbird, which was a CIA operation that led to the creation of words like conspiracy theory, and where when someone gets close to the truth, they release some of the data, but not enough to get to the full place. And there are psychological operations, and having been involved in campaigning against the genocide in Gaza, it's been exposed throughout the whole thing that there are people that are paid in order to come up on spaces, in order to derail, confuse, and spout propaganda. Israel, many of the documents were exposed in Israeli media around some of their operations, like the Hannibal Directive, where they killed their own on October the 7th, and the significant budget that was put behind paying social media influencers, and a very deliberate target was X Spaces. And so based upon my background from being involved in the Gaza genocide and many of the operatives that were exposed over time, and we had them exposed over time, we had these people that were very prominent members of the community. It came out that they were compromised and connected to Ponzi schemes and scams. And it's why you always have criminals, because the people that they recruit for these operations tend to be people where they are compromised already. It's why I believe every politician it only gets into a position of power if there's compromise. And so they use this in order to have a foothold. And so you always see these exposures, and we saw it throughout X Spaces. There were many people where their crimes were exposed, and whether it be sexual violence or Ponzi schemes or financial crimes and various other things. Anyway, all this to say is that after 650 days of being involved in the anti-genocide movement, the anti-war movements, you become pretty skeptical. And when you go as deep as I do, where you actually read all of the books on how these operations were set up with the specific declassified documents, it's very difficult to come up on a space, explain things when the vast majority of the world are so far away from the red pill that I've had to swallow, because I was a very normal person. I wasn't inclined. I mean, my whole background was I started figuring out how banking worked, and that led me down many different rabbit holes over time. And I read at least 2 books every week, so I read a lot. And so when I want to try and find something, I find the best experts in the field that have dedicated their whole life, because I spent 25 years on my topic of Bitcoin investing money. Well, Bitcoin obviously came for 14 years. But prior to that, I was a monetary reformer, and I know what it's like to spend 25 years of your life going deeper and deeper into one topic. So I try to find other people that have done that, whether it be in the case of Epstein with Ryan Dawson, or whether it be Operation Gladio and the formation of the CIA and the money laundering through Vatican Bank, with Paul Williams, or, more recent, like Whitney Webb with things like Palantir, and Peter Thiel and Trump and their connections to Epstein and various other things. And so you can't be an expert on everything, but I can follow the money, and I've developed a methodology, an understanding of the world that I call the proof of weapons network, and a methodology for following the money and using game theory, based upon studying the work of the experts and then putting together likely scenarios, which I cover every week on Bitcoin Hard Talk. So all of this to say that I have a red line, and when it comes to laughing or mocking about the genocide in Gaza, the starvation campaign, and the Holocaust that we're currently witnessing right now, having witnessed and having lost so many that I've been communicating with over X Spaces, people that I built online friendships with, I've seen them. I know people who have had their family massacred, who are the victims of sexual violence from Israeli soldiers. And so all of that, having also watched every single day these footage of mass brutality, of children, women, this starts to play an impact on your psychology. Now, I think I'm very psychologically strong. I live in a very peaceful environment. Bitcoin gave me the financial freedom, but it obviously has its toll. And so when somebody pushes the wrong lever and starts laughing because maybe they don't know as much about the subject, and then they portray a version of events that is intelligence operations version of events and propaganda. Obviously, I can lose my shit sometime. And one example is this space. Now, I believe in putting it all out there. Like, we're experiencing this journey together. We're documenting the journey of experiencing a real-time Holocaust genocide, and radically changing world. And in years to come, our grandchildren will listen to this. Imagine if you were alive during World War II, and you weren't just going to the cinema or reading the newspaper. You were actually able to communicate with Germans, Russians, and people all across Europe. And you were all put together in this one environment, and you were listening to the German propaganda, the British propaganda, the American propaganda, the Russian propaganda. And you were able to kind of deconstruct it and understand that we're fed narratives and they're radically different to the justifications, but behind the whole thing is a profit motive, and money and power shifts. And anyone that studied World War I and World War II, that the same Wall Street banksters funded both the Bolshevik revolution that led to the creation of the Soviet Union and the communist ideology, was the same people that created the Federal Reserve in order to remove capitalism from America and replace it with a debt-based Ponzi scheme that the Bank of England did in the UK, to the British Empire. And you also know that the same Wall Street financiers via the Bank for International Settlements were funding Nazi Germany, and the rise of Hitler. And they create scenarios where they benefit from all three, and then they rewrite history for the people, and the winners of wars, quote unquote, winners, end up rewriting history, and then they infiltrate university and college systems, and it becomes a part of an ideology connected to a state or a country. And never is that more prevalent in America. Americans have been fed a version of history, and they parrot things like the greatest country in the world. And I have no problem with that. But I do have a big problem with calling yourself the greatest country in the world while simultaneously covering up and engaging in a Holocaust. And you either own it or you don't. You have to own what is happening and be proud of that, and then call yourself the greatest country. But you don't get to call yourself the greatest country and pretend that what's really happening that makes you not so great isn't happening. And so that's what really is the trigger point for me. And so I joined a space, and a bunch of people were talking about Jeffrey Epstein. And I joined the conversation to add what I had, and entered into a gaslighting phase where apparently I derail. Everyone's allowed to talk about what they consider to be things that are acceptable to talk about. But apparently when I cover what I believe to be the truth, and source it, I go through with a couple of lawyers, one that is ideologically aligned with Zionism and another lawyer from the Bitcoin community, whose primary clients are probably banks and insurance companies. And so I asked a few questions around who pays their bills, what they're aligned to. I've spent so much time to become completely as independent as I can. Bitcoin gave me financial freedom. I needed no Silicon Valley money in order to create my company. And so I've distanced myself from as many agendas as possible. But I always use the same methodology in trying to understand. And if all of your clients are banks and financial institutions, there is an acceptable narrative that you have to adopt, particularly when you're doing business in America. And we spent a lot of time to break down the barriers of being able to call out the genocide without immediately being called anti-Semitic or a conspiracy theorist, or now the new word is a doomer. But these are words to censor you, to discredit you, as per Operation Mockingbird. And so I've grown a bit of a, once you've been doing this for a long time, you get used to it. And I believe the very first time I discussed this with one particular person, Joe Calasari, his immediate reaction was to call me anti-Semitic the first time I discussed some of these things. After that, he continually mocks me for engaging in conspiracy theories. I give him books to go off and read. He doesn't read it. He just goes and reads a blog and looks for what's wrong with it, and then use that as a way to discredit it and pretends or makes out like he's read the book. The final thing now is doomerism. So apparently trying to point out how the world is right now so that people can put together an effective plan based upon reality is doomerism. And I'm sorry, I'm not the one that is doing the ethnic cleansing, the genocide, and Holocaust. And to me, what we have to go through in experiencing the Holocaust and helping people understand what's actually happening is a tiny, tiny thing relative to those that are actually experiencing it themselves. And so I personally believe we are on a spiritual journey. I do believe that we will all be judged by our Creator for how we reacted. And I believe our grandchildren are going to listen to this documentation of these spaces, which I'm so meticulously making sure that I have backups on all my blogs, because I think this is going to make up the learning of history. And I think our children in the future are going to have to understand, how did we allow this to happen? If you could go back and understand, how did the previous Holocaust during World War II happen? And how was it rewritten and weaponized? If we had documented the whole thing without the propaganda, we would have a radically different understanding of the world as we understand it today, which would change our actions. And there can only ever be peace when we have the truth, is my belief. So with that in mind, that was my little intro, but I just wanted to document this space so that you could learn from all of these tactics being used in real time: denial, mockery, and trying to make someone look silly, and then using all of these doomerism, conspiracy theories, anti-Semitism, in real time. So maybe this will be an educational experience for you. But I don't apologize for my passion. I believe that sometimes you got to express things in a manner that has the full passion of the severity of the situation. And right now, we are in a severe situation. Even our governments in UK and France, which are fully compromised, they're having to come out and say, if you don't end this starvation campaign by September, we're going to recognize Palestine as a state. How crazy is that? You have to commit a Holocaust in order to recognize a state when there was a history of just plonking Israel on top of Palestine through settler colonialism, rewriting history. And what would you do to protect what you call, quote unquote, Western values? What would you do to protect your life, your liberty, your freedom, and your property rights if somebody came into your land and your home and tried to claim that this land and this home is now ours and engage in sexual violence with your family? You know what you'd do. You'd firstly hope that the First Amendment would give you the freedom of speech to talk about it. And secondly, you'd hope that the Second Amendment and your ability to protect and defend yourself and resist would be used, because you would do anything. You would be a resistance movement against those stealing your life, liberty, freedom, and property rights. And that is exactly what happened. But for some reason, we're told through this parallel history and brainwashing and the weaponization of religion that the Palestinians don't get to resist and protect their life, liberty, and freedom. And in other podcasts, and content, I'll go through the weaponization of the word terrorism and the confusion around the funding of CIA organizations and Mossad organizations like ISIS and Al Qaeda in order to confuse you. I've covered that many times. But anyway, enjoy the space. I hope it's a learning experience. And I'm just documenting here in history, the types of things that you have to go to if you want to stand up for what you believe to be right once you take the red pill and become well-read and understand the things that I cover each and every week in Bitcoin Hard Talk, when I cover this week in Bitcoin, this week in macro, this week in geopolitics, and on my blog on simondixon.com. So enjoy the space. And one final thought before you do that: this is what Bitcoin was created for. And while we've got all of these bankers and it's changed the world and it's become a world asset class, currently over $2.3 trillion, I was there. Bitcoin was a resistance against banking. Bitcoin was a resistance against funding wars. It was an exit and an opt-out. And no matter how much you try and rewrite history, thankfully on my YouTube channel, Simon Dixon, I wish that I had documented more. But from before Bitcoin, I was documenting my journey in monetary reform, and even have the YouTube video of my presentation at the original Bitcoin conference, and everything in between. So I also back it up in case I get banned from YouTube, on podcasts and on the Bitcoin Hard Talk membership portal at simondixon.com. Okay, that's enough of my rambling. I'll see you. I hope you enjoy the X-Space recording and learn from it. And sorry for losing my shit in advance. No, I don't apologize. I lose my shit because it was warranted.
Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're looking into, well, a really intense online debate. It started in finance, but quickly spiraled into geopolitics, trust, power, the works.
Yeah, it's centered around Simon Dixon, the Bitcoin and alternative finance pioneer. We're digging into his take on an X space he was in.
Right, an X space that's like a live chat on X used to be Twitter. And Dixon wrote about it, connecting financial systems, real-world stuff, and why he thinks Bitcoin is fundamentally about peaceful resistance.
So our goal here is to unpack that, see how following the money, as he puts it, can reveal some surprising things, and why sometimes the personal gets, well, very geopolitical.
Okay, so let's set the scene. This X space. Dixon says it pretty quickly moved away from its original topic.
Right. Apparently it started somewhere else entirely, but landed on this fundamental clash about trust.
Yeah, you had lawyers like Joe Carlasar and Zach Shapiro arguing that, look, the world's complex. You kind of have to trust subject matter experts. Doing your own research doesn't always cut it.
Which is a fair point in many ways. But it raises that big question for you listening. Who do you trust when there's just so much information, so many narratives?
And Dixon came in with a completely different angle, didn't he? Based on his, 25 years looking at money and power.
Exactly. His counter was simple: follow the money. He basically suggests powerful people often have their stances dictated by who's funding them, that they might be compromised.
He even called it out directly in the space, asking Tanalists about their clients.
He did, and he framed it not as like a personal attack, but as crucial context. Conflicts of interest, right? It ties straight into that core Bitcoin idea. Don't trust, verify.
So a real clash of philosophies on how to even find truth.
Absolutely. One side saying trust the experts, the other saying verify the incentives.
Then things apparently got tense. Dixon talks about hitting a red line.
Yeah, he says it happened when he brought up what he described as the ongoing U.S.-funded genocide in Gaza. He refused to let it be brushed aside.
And the reaction was pushback, telling him it's anti-American propaganda or just talk Bitcoin.
That's what he recounts. And he points to this as a tactic using labels like conspiracy theorist or, anti-Semitic to shut down difficult topics.
He mentioned a specific exchange with Zach Shapiro.
Right. Dixon says Shapiro stated he didn't see it as genocide and saw Hamas as the bad guy. For Dixon, this interaction was revealing. He connects it to what he calls the proof of weapons network.
Proof of weapons network, meaning?
He essentially argues it's a system, a network that profits from conflict, from war and destruction. And he saw that disagreement as exposing that network's influence, in his view.
So, okay, how does he tie that explosive idea back to Bitcoin? Why is it relevant?
Because for Dixon, separating Bitcoin from geopolitics is just wrong. He argues Bitcoin was made for this exact situation. It's resistant.
Resistance against what specifically?
Against the financial institutions, the systems, that he believes fund these wars. He talks about being at the very first Bitcoin conference. And the feeling was us versus the banks. Bitcoin was designed, he says, as an exit.
An opt-out.
Yeah, an opt-out from what he calls a corrupt banking system that props up the U.S. dollar with war, death, destruction, and violence. Strong words.
So for him, Bitcoin isn't just like digital gold or an investment. It's a practical tool.
A tool for peaceful protest. That's key. Boycott the Fed by saving outside their system. Boycott BlackRock using self-custody, not EPFs. Boycott banks by not borrowing against Bitcoin. Even boycotting the war machine through conscious spending.
It's a freedom technology then. More about principle than price swings.
That's his core message. It's a way to fight back, peacefully, using finance itself.
Now, there was something that happened after this X-Space finished, wasn't there? A kind of postscript?
Right. Dixon mentioned that during the debate, his opponents argued nobody could really know the ground truth in Gaza.
Yeah.
Well, shortly after, a video came out from Tucker Carlson. It featured a whistleblower, retired U.S. Green Beret Elteen Cole, Tony Aguilar.
Okay.
Aguilar was apparently part of something called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF, and was on the ground. He reportedly confirmed witnessing horrific war crimes.
Wow. And Dixon saw this as
validation. He highlighted it as evidence supporting his own earlier statements, where he'd characterized the GHF as a U.S.-funded operation perpetrating a Holocaust. He points out this info came out after the debate.
So looking at this whole episode through Simon Dixon's lens, it really paints a picture of money, power, and global events being, deeply connected.
Definitely. It pushes you to think about personal responsibility when faced with these huge, complex geopolitical situations, and whether something like Bitcoin can actually function as that peaceful resistance he talks about.
It leaves you with some big questions, doesn't it? In this world flooded with information, with influence, how do you decide who or what to trust?
And what part do your own financial choices play? Is that Bitcoin mantra, don't trust, verify, just a technical thing for crypto geeks? Or is it maybe, just maybe, a broader guide for navigating, everything, something to think about?
OCO group. And if you look up OKO, and this goes all the way back to New York, you guys will see that New York actually sued OCO group regarding bad things here. The owner of OCO group, believe it or not, was P. Diddy's neighbor. and that's Vlad Dorian. And he actually sold his home in this during the scandal of P Diddy. He was seen and spotted during Art Basel, Miami, and this could help you guys trace some of the why back to
All right, that's a little too much. That's just not gonna work. Joe, you wanna make it back?
Why does that always happen? We're just having a good
Yeah,
conversation.
I
And then
yeah,
someone comes
exactly.
and reads like
I just can't. I'm
P
sorry.
Diddy
It's
is
not.
working with
Well, I made the
Taz and
mistake,
Twitch and the
Omar.
Rockefellers, and they.
Yeah, I made the mistake, Omar, yesterday going into one of these moon landings. Gary Cardone's hosting one, and I couldn't take it. The amount of moon landing conspiracy was off the
Hey,
chart.
that was fun,
No,
Joe.
I was
That was a
there.
fun
I was
stream.
there for like 5 minutes. My blood pressure spiked to 200.
So I
Like
appreciate
that
your
was too
opinion on
much.
that.
I don't take these conspiracy ones. These things are, and look, I'm talking about Epstein, so I'm happy, but like this,
Fred.
literally, the latest thing is that Joe and Zach are both CIA operatives, and that I probably am one too. That's kind of the latest. So
How could you guys do that to us? Why would you deceive us like that? How could you do that?
I don't know.
Come on. No, for real, you're not CIA operatives. Is that not true?
But Fred, another thing about this Epstein thing is we don't know where this Epstein list story was planted years ago, right? So Epstein wasn't the only person doing this. We know that for a fact. Okay, how come no one's bringing up the Nexium guys or all the other guys who were doing all this
Doing
weird
what?
stuff?
Pedophilia? Like what is?
No, blackmail.
Oh, okay. Yeah, a lot of people have been doing blackmail for a long time.
But why is Epstein the only list that everyone brings up?
Because it's the biggest, probably. That's why it's the most.
Well, I
ridiculous.
mean, we don't know that for a fact,
I'm
but
sure
it just seems like that story was planted many years ago. We don't know who it was planted by, and now it's getting brought up right around the time when I don't know. It's just interesting that no one
Hoover
really
had a
talks about.
list. Hoover, my boss,
Hoover had a
Hoover had a
list,
list. You know about that guy? He had a
he was
list.
a cross-dresser, wasn't he?
No, I can't. No comment.
Guys, if you actually want to know, like a lot of what people believe is on the Epstein list, like there's been a lot of work done on it. You can read all the court documents. You can read the settlements from J.P. Morgan, Deutsche Bank, all the other financial institutions. It's mainly banks, and it's mainly you can look at all the victim testimonies. The person that's done the most amount of work on it for like the last 20 years was Ryan Dawson. I put some links if anyone actually wants to get to the truth of it, or what we know about it. So there's a massive list already. What people want is for it to be celebrities, but it's actually mainly banksters. There was some, obviously, Bill Clinton were the high level names, but it's mainly a finance. And so the reason you won't get the list is because the same people that finance the politicians and do all the campaign financing are the ones that were running the ring. It's also got connections to the following intelligence, and it's definitely got connections to CIA, Mossad, and MI6. So if anyone actually wants to take it as like a serious piece of work rather than just trying to call out celebrities, I think it has massive implications.
Hey, Simon, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I'm not an expert in this list that Fred keeps talking about, but can somebody give me like a good primer on like what was the origin of the list, assuming it exists? Like, did Epstein just like scribble out a big list of all the people that?
No, there is no list.
Wait,
What people
Fred
keep?
says there is.
No, there isn't a list. There are videos. There are Epstein had, and by the way, it's not just the island. He had like 6 different houses. There were a couple of islands, and they filmed everybody that came in the house, came on the plane, and the idea was to have a film of everybody that you wanted to compromise. The main people that Jeffrey Epstein, he was focusing on scientific research, the techno bros, and
No, I
financiers.
hear all that,
Yeah.
but I want to go back to this for a second. There is a belief.
So
Okay.
there is a plain list which Biden already released, and that was also circulated by the Epstein files through the X when so there's and
But
then
didn't
there's the
Pam
black
Bondi
and then
say,
there's the
I've
black
seen the
book.
list? Pam Bondi said, I've seen the list. It's on my desk, or I'm paraphrasing, but something to that effect.
Yeah, so what Pam Bondi did is she took the things that had already been released by Biden, which was Ghislaine Maxwell's black book and the flight log, and then she made a whole or the Trump administration made a whole PR spectacle and invited a bunch of influencers, which are, I mean, clearly the type of influencers that's played to do state propaganda, and gave them a file that had nothing in it.
Why would they do that in your mind? Why would they create some sort of list knowing that there isn't one? And now everybody seems to believe, right or wrong, that there's some list out there that you can just call up. So why would they do that? What is the thought? Just
Political
lying?
I
campaigning on
think,
it.
yeah. Here's my personal belief, and again, I can't back this up with evidence. But Trump, I believe, doesn't control the list. Even Elon knows that the list can't be released
You
because
just
it's
said there was no list.
okay. By list, I mean the videotapes, all the files. Let's call it files. Is that better?
No, but that's not a list. Okay, this is
I-
what I don't understand. Like, okay, I
Well,
buy.
let's
Let's
just
just
call it
assume.
the Epstein database. Let's
But
call it
yeah.
the Epstein database.
So you could
Which
construct
is a
your own
complete
list,
set
and
of records
yeah, and
with
Ryan
compromised a
Dawson,
lot of people.
Ryan Dawson did construct the list, and I put a link to it in the chat if anyone wants to go
But
into all
there's
this
a
stuff.
fun. My problem with this, just philosophically, is that there's a fundamental difference from, like, there's a lot of data that shows people he interacted with and who went to the island and all that. That's fundamentally different than some list or dossier or some sort of compilation of all
It
those
depends what you
people.
define list.
Anybody can.
Yeah, but that is correct, Jay. But it's also a distraction. What people want to know is who was targeted to be compromised and who was compromised, and that obviously requires a full investigation. But the reality is, anybody that studied the subject, there is significant evidence that that's done by what we call the quote unquote deep state. And
Simon,
so the same people investigating the FBI, the CIA, are the same people that were implicated in these operations. And so
Simon,
my belief is Trump can't release it. And so therefore it's become
There's
another.
nothing to release if there's not actually a list. That's my point.
Ho-
If
Hold
there's
on,
a,
Joe,
hold on. No,
Trump,
you're working on the list. We're talking about, so let's take away the list and
it's a
just talk.
database. It's a
Yeah,
database.
it's
but a
files.
database assumes there's
Or
some
So,
compilation.
a data lake. It's a data lake.
but
Is what I
if
think.
if the FBI did a compilation of all because they did all the witness testimony, they did all the court cases, they did all the settlements, they know who was on all the videos. They know
Right.
if you want to turn that into a list, you can.
No,
I'm sure.
It's a data lake.
make it
It's a
very.
I'm
data
sure
lake.
the FBI have a
Let me
list.
rephrase it to make it as broad as possible. Do you believe there is some work product out there that is a repository of names?
It's data. It's videos. It's
Uh,
lists. It's
yeah, I mean, well,
it's
Well,
text
and
files. It's
connected
but
to
documents.
each
the
name,
the most
and it
yeah.
involves a score of how implicated that person is, like on a scale of 1 to
Yeah,
10.
but I mean, no. So I don't know how they form it, but I know they've got videos. I know that CDs were confiscated. That's how long ago it was. I know that there were all the different files that were, because they did it with the, when you release the JFK files or you release the MLK files, which you've got all the files that are put together, and then the challenge is that this is implication at the highest level. And so you've got the same people that were part of the operation covering up the operation that are also saying they're going to reveal the operation, because that's the level that this was at.
Simon, would you agree that there's just as equally a likelihood that they took compromised people and put them in positions of power?
Oh, I
versus the
mean,
other way?
absolutely. I mean, so I hold a belief that you can't be in a position of power unless you're compromised. That's why we're all wondering why our leaders all around the world are such idiots. It's not
So if that,
incompetency; it's just that they're all compromised.
so if that's the case, the release of this this list and the abstraction, or the, let's just say, the full transparency of what's going on here, has a, if that's true, then we have a systemic risk for the full transparency because of the public reaction to because I don't think pedophilia, sex with underage girls, I think that is a parking ticket compared to what the stuff that was going on down there.
Yeah, I mean, it implicates intelligence. It implicates like lots of Israeli prime ministers, Bill
What's
Clinton.
the stuff that would happen on the island that would make abusing children look like a parking ticket? I just want to be clear about what you mean by that.
Who said that?
I said I'm saying
Child sacrifice.
Is that what you're saying, that they like did blood sacrifices and satanic stuff?
Cannibalism. Cannibalism.
Well, to be fair, I don't think
is this part of the QAnon thing that you think that?
Guys, like seriously, if you want to joke around about this and try and divert, these are crimes against
I was
humanity.
just asking what Thomas meant by they were doing things that made abusing children look like a parking ticket.
I get it, and this may be a Jerry Springer show for you, but if you've ever actually listened to the witness testimony and the victims of these crimes, these are serious crimes against humanity.
I agree with you. So Simon, let me just go back to, let's make this constructive. So if we agree necessarily there's not some specific list, okay, let's just get that. You said it was a distraction. I tend to agree with you. There has to be source material, okay, incriminating source material that has not yet seen the light of day. So tell me about that. What does that consist of, and how do we know it exists?
So all the different houses were fitted out with cameras. And the idea behind what most people believe Jeffrey Epstein was doing was to bring in important people to the house. Abercrombie and Finch was the front organization for recruiting models. Victoria's Secrets was the other front organization for recruiting models.
How do we know that?
Well, I can point you to all the different documents, all the stuff that's already been released.
So just the cameras, the stuff that's been released says that he had a camera in the public area of his house in the living room, but that there actually was not cameras in the bedrooms like lots of people are alleging. So do you think that's wrong? And if so, then what different evidence or files are you pulling?
I'm not sure, but if you want me to bring up...
You're making these allegations based on something,
No,
right?
I'm telling you the bits I do know, Zach. And the bits I do know, and I tell you, most of my work comes from Ryan Dawson, who spent 25 years on this. There were when the FBI came into these houses, there was loads and loads and loads of CDs that were confiscated. And that's what people, I think, are looking for. And that's also what was confirmed. Now, the problem with that is that they'll then say, okay, who wants to watch underage people having sex and all that type of stuff, which is why people divert it back to a list and testimony. And now Ghislaine Maxwell, who we can't trust for shit, the daughter of Robert Maxwell, who was a Mossad agent.
Hang on a second. Just one thing, Simon. It's not.
But Ghislaine Maxwell's going to release 100 on the list. Yeah, exactly.
Victims of the crime, right? In their, privacy should be respected. Okay, so
Correct.
it's not just that who wants to watch this thing. It's like people are impacted by those tapes being
the
released.
DOJ's specific statement, which
absolutely.
maybe you believe or maybe you don't, is that what these videos show is Epstein himself abusing children. They say that there's nothing in the videos that incriminates other non-charged individuals. Now, you can say that that's bullshit, and we think that there are other people that are on those videos. But then I would ask, that
doesn't match
what's your evidence for that?
Yeah, so now you need to start listening to the victim testimonies, and you need to start cross-referencing what was said there versus the victims and what they said.
Sure.
Plus,
there's only been one
add that to the fact.
Allegation from one of the victims.
Add that to the fact. Hold on. Add that to the fact that there was $800 million of settlements as well. And so you're not going to get the perfect story, but you can look who settled. You can look at the witness testimonies. You can look at what has been released. And then you can start looking at all the people that would routinely visit the houses. And then you can start look at things like when they went into Jeffrey Epstein's house, they had all the I'm sure you've seen the incriminating pictures and paintings and various other things of Bill Clinton wearing Monica Lewinsky's dress, and George Bush Jr. sitting in front of a desk with a paper plane with two Jenga towers, in front of him. So you have to, you're not going to get the full story because these are intelligence operations. But that's what people want. They want transparency because clearly this is not just Jeffrey Epstein having sex with children. There is a
I
clear
mean,
organized
Yeah,
crime
I mean,
element to
are
this.
we being, is the United States being run by Israeli and other
No, I
intelligence?
think Israel is
Please don't.
a scapegoat for military contractors' crimes, and I think personally, I
Okay.
believe that Israel is a U.S. colony. But most people, the reason I think you're getting more and more stories about, because they're kind of ready to, I think, scapegoat Israel for much of the crimes that the U.S. has engaged with. No, so I believe that there is Israel is a part of a structure that sits above government, but Israel is not the full story. That's just the plausible deniability for the massive crimes against humanity that many of the military companies commit. That's my personal belief. Others believe that Israel's like on top of the chain, but that's just completely infeasible to me.
So Simon, your view is it's large defense contractors like Raytheon or
Yeah, correct. I
General
mean,
Dynamics.
then you need to start going back into the formation of the CIA, the parties involved, the corporations that are still public companies today. And so I personally believe, yeah, the quote unquote deep state is sits underneath these military companies. And
The problem, though, Simon, is this. Okay, here's the problem with any of these types of things, just from a practical standpoint. Let's just say there was some directive that everything gets released, including, potentially videos that show minors and, victims of abuse having to have their, images put out there in the public domain. Even if everything were released, people would still have the argument, Fred. Well, that's not everything. There's still something else out there. There's still videos they withheld. The CIA, like you said, Simon, is not going to let everybody know all the facts. So there virtually is no amount of information you can put out to satisfy people's doubts that more bad things happen. That's the practical issue. There's like nothing that could be done in this situation to ever quash the most radical conspiracies about what happened on that island. And I'm not saying it's all conspiracy. I'm just saying you're never going to get somebody to believe that we've got everything.
that's true. But the problem is that the Trump run on the campaign that he would release these files, and then he did a whole PR propaganda campaign, which was either a mistake or not, around releasing the files, and then came out and said there are no files at the same time as paying for a genocide and crimes against humanity.
I don't think he said there's no files. I've never heard him say that.
He did, yes. I can give you the
He
videos
said
where
there's
he
no
actually said.
Epstein files, even though his own FBI.
Yeah, he said it's a Democrat hoax, and it was Obama, and it doesn't exist. It was Biden, and
yeah,
this.
he
I can give you.
basically
I'll
did
give
say
you a
that.
thread with
Yep.
all the videos. Yeah, I'll give you a thread with all the videos if people are interested in this stuff.
So,
I'll put it
I
in
mean,
the
Zach, I don't
there
even
is
conversation.
understand.
there is
I don't
irony
even
there,
understand.
right? They did run heavily on the list exists, and it's going to show that all of
No,
our
they said
political
the
enemies
list,
are in
but
this together. And then they
they,
basically are saying now there's no list.
But
Obviously, politically,
basically,
that's a bad look.
no, I
yeah,
understand
my
the list, but the
speculation is
files
Trump.
exist. There's got to be source materials that are
There can't,
files.
look, there can't be no files. I think
Yeah, that's
what
what
he
I'm
said was
saying.
that there
I don't
was
think
no
Trump told us
list.
that
There
there's
are
no
files.
files.
Yeah, of course there are files.
The
What he
question
said was
is
that there is no
who
list.
can. The question is who controls them, and my personal speculation is that it's beyond Trump, and that they are controlled by basically the operation, the financiers, and they're still the same types of people that are running these operations today. And Trump is compromised because every president is compromised.
And Simon, is this a group of people you think that has basically been sort of running world affairs maybe for decades or centuries now?
No, so I personally believe that if you look at the current structure, I kind of buy into the managed. If you look at like the asset managers, they have a portfolio of companies, and underneath those portfolio of companies, there's various sectors like the military industrial complex. And the military industrial complex have the same state contractors that the government uses. And I do believe that there are organized ways of managing wars, financing of wars, rebuilding, and
But this group of
profiting
people who are
from all of
managing
those
it,
wars.
like, is this like the Freemasons you think it is, or you think it's the Jews,
No,
or like what group of people is
I,
running all this?
Yeah, so I personally believe that if you look at all the different public companies, if you look at who's the shareholder in most of the major public companies, because over time power changes. So these used to be private companies. Goldman Sachs used to be a private company. JP Morgan used to be a private company. Over time, they become public companies. But if you look at the formation of BlackRock and the founding teams and the various venture capital funds in Silicon Valley that were set up as from CIA types of operations, you go all the way to the top of the chain and you realize that BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard have significant influence, but it's like a stateless, decentralized network at the top, which is determined by your wealth and what shares you own in these various companies.
So if you have enough shares of like Vanguard ETFs, you get led into the global cabal. And when did the global cabal start?
No, so if you have enough to actually influence the shareholding vote, and if you actually meet at these World Economic Forum meetings and you actually meet at these Bank for International Settlements meetings, I don't think it necessarily has a name, and I understand what you're trying to do, Zach. I think you're trying to
At what time did this
make it
group
sound.
come to power? When did they get so powerful that they get to pull the strings and scapegoat Israel and control the United States government? Like when did this paradigm start?
Power changes over time,
With
and
the
so
creation of the
it's
Federal
fluid.
Reserve Act, when the Federal Reserve was created.
The Federal Reserve was the mechanism, I believe, for consolidating European banking power into the money supply of the dollar, and the shareholders of the Federal Reserves are the banks. And so banks used to be very important, but over time, the asset managers within it have become more important over time.
Simon, can I ask one quick question? Is Trump in the files or the database or the data lake having sex with underage girls? Do you know?
I don't know the answer to that.
Simon, can I ask a question?
I do know his involvement in various mafia groups, and the types of people he needed to hang around in building his real estate empire. And I do know like the types of people in the Trump administration that have got deep connections to the Epstein network, and that's Howard Lutnick, Steve Witkoff, and various other people. Like they have a very shady background when it comes to. I mean, you're not going to get the full story, but if you look at like the neighborhoods where they all lived, and Howard Lutnick was Jeffrey Epstein's neighbor. Peter Thiel received significant money from the Epstein families. The Epstein finances, and then you go back to Lex Wexner and various other people at these chains. But Zach, what you're asking for, I know you're asking to put it into a cabal.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand.
But I think it's just structurally, how the asset managers are able to influence their various holdings, where they have both board seats and structurally the largest shareholding.
Okay, but the claim is that the asset managers are using Epstein in part, at least, as a way to control
No.
the U.S. government.
You've got to go. You got to. So I call it
what's
like
the connection between Epstein and like BlackRock, in your view?
So Epstein, I believe, is intelligence. Intelligence are probably about 80% of intelligence resources.
Sorry, if you don't mind, what do you mean by he is intelligence? Is he like actually a CIA
well, he was
or
an
Mossad
asset. He was an asset.
officer, or he's an asset that the intelligence agencies are using?
I believe that CIA and Mossad in various operations they'll act independently, but in most operations they act in tandem.
But is Epstein an agent of one of those organizations, or is he an asset that they are just using?
He was an asset, and his handler, all the evidence would say, was Ghislaine Maxwell, and Ghislaine Maxwell was the daughter of Robert Maxwell, and Robert Maxwell was a Mossad super agent.
Wait, hold on, just to understand the claims you're making here. So the CIA and Mossad each work for governments, right? The CIA reports to the President of the United States.
No, they're private. A lot of them are private contractors. So while you work for the government, the same contractors will also work for military corporations, and so you can have there's I would say
okay, so it's not the CIA or the Mossad. It's people who used to work there and are now at defense contractors. Is that what you're saying? The story does seem to keep changing.
Simon,
Zach, I understand you're trying to.
Simon, can I ask?
I'm just trying to pin you down on what your view is, and it's very confusing.
I'll tell you. All right. Well, I'll tell you my view. I think there is a network, and that network changes based upon wealth. And it's not what you're trying to pin me down on, the Jews or anything like that, or what many people create these conspiracy theories around. I think that it changes based upon wealth. And I think the world is way more coordinated at the top than most people
So once you get a
credibly
certain
give
amount of
credence to.
wealth, you get invited to join the decentralized, I won't use the word cabal, but control group that is the real boss of the US president. Is that like
So
when
hold
you hit
on,
a net worth number, you get an invite in the mail?
Zach, stop being a fucking idiot. The reality is, if you want to participate in this network, if you want to become a shareholder in BlackRock, if you end up creating a company using military industrial complex technology, like Elon does, like Peter Thiel does, like Palantir is, like all of these different, like Google does, like Larry Summers does, these different people, if you want to participate in that network, then you can get special privileges in creating your company, special support, special technology. And if your company becomes worth a significant amount and you're still a founding shareholder, then you may get an invite to the different types of meetings in World Economic Forum and various other meetings that happen around the world where people coordinate on global affairs.
Simon, can I ask a question? Simon,
And intelligence, no doubt, I believe most of their resources work under private military industrial complex companies as well.
Simon, you've made your point. It's pretty clear, in my opinion. Taylor, go for it.
well,
Taylor.
I was trying to ask Simon a question, a very simple question. This seems a very contorted, complicated, multiple decade plan. I just wanted to ask him, who conceived of this plan and what's the modus operandi? Because, look, you can become very wealthy without resorting to blackmail and,
Absolutely. And I became very wealthy, and I don't buy BlackRock shares. I boycott various institutions. I would never participate in those crimes against humanity. I didn't take Silicon Valley
but,
money for my company, and so I remained autonomous and independent. But
what's the modus?
most people don't have that luxury. Most people end up creating a startup, taking Silicon Valley money. Then they may be involved in the types of
But why?
security. Sorry.
To what end? To what end? That's what I'm trying to
But
ask you.
what do you think
Like, if you
Jeffrey Epstein is? It's a
if you have
network.
if you have a choice between making a lot of money and getting involved with shady crimes against humanity, manipulation, blackmail, control, oppression, like
Do you think Jeffrey
I'm just going
Epstein
to make
gave
money.
people a choice?
But I don't understand. Like, I asked you a simple question: who conceived of this huge plan, and what's the modus operandi?
So personally, look, what you're looking for is one control structure. This is a fluid network that changes based upon power dynamics and wealth, and people screwing each other over, and some people climbing the ladder and some people going down. But it depends how far you want to go back. If you want to start looking at how the Federal Reserve System was created, then you can look at the families that created it. But over time, there was a lot of innovation in financialization and securitization,
But
where
Simon,
people
it's
were
when you're asked sort of direct questions like, "What are these people out for?" You answer with,
profit,
"Look at
money.
the family. Look at the guy. The time this guy had lunch with this other guy. Look at rich people who are funding." Like, this is just sort of vaguely waving in the direction of conspiratorial stuff, rather than saying, "Here's who I think it is, and here's what I think they're trying to do."
But
Which is the direct question you keep getting asked.
I personally think that at the current moment, that BlackRock represents a significant part of a power structure,
And what is their motive? What are they trying to do?
and they profit. They need to meet their quarterly profit goals, and
But
they have a
Simon,
portfolio. They have a portfolio of military companies, technology companies, financial companies, banks, pharmaceutical companies.
MicroStrategy.
MicroStrategy as well. They're trying to accumulate as much Bitcoin in their portfolio as possible, which is why everyone's in self-custody if you care about humanity. But it's basically the US stock market is the current structure where these people are hosting much of their wealth, and they're managing their portfolios. And war is very, very profitable. You always have to have a war. You can't let a war go away, because that would have a massive impact on the profits of some of these companies.
And what does it
And
have to do
so
with
through
Epstein? What does it have to do with Epstein?
so Epstein there are multiple blackmail operations, and Epstein is one of those operations
To what end? To what end?
if it can be exposed. Well, Epstein, from my understanding, was to have strategic leverage over financiers. So those financiers could put their finance into various lobby groups. And also, he was involved in stealing science and technology that was laundered via Israel over to China. Those were some
This is
other.
the same as the
If you
way that
look
he
at
was talking about
ChinaGate,
Mayor Suarez, right? This
if
is
you
the
look at
same level of it's
ChinaGate,
all one big conspiracy.
Simon,
I don't know what that
Simon, I
means.
want to ask
I don't
you.
know what that means.
I
But
want
you
to ask.
you keep filibustering, but I'm not actually answering the question.
Hang on 1 second. Taylor, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was actually just wondering Simon's thoughts on two specific kind of parts of the puzzle. One being
We're losing
Frazzle
you, my
Drip,
friend.
and one being like Pizzagate, and just kind of where you think those fit in.
I didn't hear that. Sorry.
How do Frazzle Drip and Pizzagate fit into this? Was the question.
I haven't studied those ones enough. Yeah, I don't know. Can't comment on them.
For those who don't know, Frazzle Drip is allegedly a video of Hillary Clinton cutting off a child's face and wearing it like a mask that a lot of people are convinced exists. And Pizzagate is
Is it out
John
there?
Podesta and Hillary Clinton running a child sex trafficking ring in the basement of a DC pizza shop that unfortunately doesn't have a basement for this theory, but it got payment and demand for the show and the children.
I
Pierce, what's
recommend
up?
if people want to like get to the bottom of various source materials and various other things, I think there's two starting points. One is Operation Gladio, which is based upon all the CIA declassified documents, which goes through the formation of the CIA from Operation Paperclip, the various mafia organizations that were involved in it. It goes through where all the money was laundered via the Vatican banks and all the declassified documents. And then it will walk you through to modern day stuff like funding terrorism, like ISIS and Al Qaeda and various other militia group that US funds.
But okay, so
Um,
you told me this
and
previously.
then finally, another book,
Hang
One
on a
Nation
second.
Under Blackmail by Whitney Webb, that goes through the Epstein specifically, and then Ryan Dawson's work that I'll link to below as well. Okay.
Simon, you referred me to
Simon was the super PAC.
Operation
Was
Gladio
the
months
super PAC?
ago. I did it. You just said
Oh, did read it?
I did, and you said if you want to get to the bottom of this, you should study this. I picked up 2 books about it, and what my conclusion is, it gives there's no getting to the bottom of anything you're saying. Like, yes, was there a Cold War?
Which books did you read? Was it Paul Williams?
What was there Cold War?
Hold on, which books did you read? What about all the ISIS and Al Qaeda stuff that goes through to today? Did you read the Paul Williams one?
No, hang on a second. The name of the book, I got the audio. It's The Unholy Alliance, Operation Gladio. The Unholy Alliance, Vatican, CIA, and the Mafia. Paul Williams. And again, were there clandestine efforts? Did they try to stand up armies in Western Europe? Was the CIA involved in many other countries? Yes, all that's true.
And what about
to
the
make
Middle Eastern
logical
stuff? Have you Iran Contra and ISIS and Al Qaeda?
One moment. Is there any connection between that and Jeffrey Epstein? I mean,
Have you read Whitney Webb's book?
Wait, Simon, instead of letting Joe talk, you keep every time he tries to explain what he read, you say, "Have you read this other thing? Have you read this other fringe conspiracy?"
This is the problem with your theory, because you put these things together as fact as opposed to theory. You should just disclose that, based on your belief in clandestine operations and leverage and blackmail, that this is how this all transpired. At least that's, I think, a more honest presentation of the facts. But you present it as, well, if you want to get to the bottom of it, there's no bottom to get to. Most of what you're saying is speculation, piecing together theories and tactics that have existed for hundreds of years, by the way. Blackmail is not a new concept by any means. And you're saying because of human nature and because of the accumulation of power and wealth, therefore this must be true. It must be true that Epstein was, rather than just a very sick, perverted man with high-level associates, because he's wealthy, he was an intelligence agent.
Okay, all right. So different question. Okay, so I was asked about background. I was filibustered with different questions around who's in charge, who are these people. I was answering those questions. Now let's get back to Jeffrey Epstein. if you want to go, if you want to study on Jeffrey Epstein, the two best sources is One Nation Under Blackmail by Whitney Webb, and also Ryan Dawson, that has spent 25 years compiling every aspect of anything that has been released around this, all the interviewed victims, compiled his own list based upon the work. And I'll link to it with all the different books that you can read around this specific subject, that makes it a very compelling case that these are intelligence operations and not just some
Given
pervert.
that you've read the book, for our benefit, why don't you lay out a short version of what that very compelling case is?
Wait, so can I interject? Because I'm not sure if anybody else in the room read the Whitney Webb book. At least I read, I think, about 250 pages of volume one. It's 2 volumes, so I think it ends up being like 600, 700 pages. My issue with the kind of conspiratorial framework, and it's not that I don't believe it, I do believe that there's very pernicious intersections of government power, of military power, intelligence, finance, organized crime, that involves blackmail and perversion, all these things. But I think what people are getting at when they're criticizing you, Simon, is that the network is always so kind of amorphous and so difficult to kind of identify who are the actors that it's incapable of being destroyed. So even when you kind of get to the bottom of it, quote unquote, you just understand that, okay, stuff is murky and shifty and evil at the top, but it's also so amorphous and fluid that key actors can't be identified and destroyed, and such that this will just always be the case, that at the top of the global order, so to speak, despite there being elected officials, despite there being obviously people that we know and can identify like Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, there's always going to be this shadowy network of financiers and intelligence agents and assets that will never be publicly known, such that this network can never be identified or destroyed. And this is kind of just the state of things and will be the state of things indefinitely, right? And then it kind of led you to this doomerism where it's like, okay, even if I were to dedicate my entire life to identifying every network and I had a map of papers and all the pins and strings on my wall, it wouldn't really matter. So if it's incapable of being destroyed, at
So
what point
I
it
disagree,
does not matter.
because I personally believe that it's now encompassed itself into corporate interests in public companies. And many of the original, more centralized players have exited their positions or rolled them up into trust structures over time. And so, in the end, if you want an empowering message, the empowering message is be conscious of your money, because you may be funding the very same things that actually are crimes against humanity and creating and funding very, very dark networks. And so, personally, I believe that you can boycott the Federal Reserve by owning Bitcoin.
Okay.
I believe that you can boycott BlackRock by owning it in self custody rather than with them. I believe that by not borrowing against your Bitcoin, you can boycott the banks, which is the grease of the whole wheel. And I believe that by exposing which corporations need to be exposed, i.e., Palantir, and the crimes against humanity that they're committing right now, then people might sell their share prices. And just like with Starbucks, where by boycotting somebody that was the CEO that was funding illegal Israeli settlements, the share price was impacted 10% and he actually got fired. So in the end, I believe that by not distracting yourself with politicians that only listen to lobbies and understand the sources of corporate power, you can actually redirect your money to actually have an impact. And I think it's quite empowering once you know that. But if you're distracted believing that voting for Trump and voting for Biden and voting for the next controlled person that you're going to vote for, you're going to be distracted and you'll be disempowered forever. So
Simon,
control your money and you can change things.
Simon, can I ask Simon, the super PAC affair shake, which, let's face it, got Trump elected. They were the largest donor in the last presidential election. Are you suggesting that the money that came from a fair shake was dirty money?
So if you look at Trump's 3 top backers in the last election, the number one was Elon Musk, which is obviously
Simon,
the
can't you just
technical
answer a
industry.
question? He asked a very direct question.
Yeah,
And it's
but
very frustrating to have these conversations. Just state your view, please.
why? But I don't see him on the list. What number on the list was he?
Elon
It's
Musk
Fair
spent
Shake,
his
the
own.
Coinbase super
Elon,
PAC.
Yeah, Elon Musk spent his own money. That was not through the mostly not through the political
Okay,
system.
sorry,
Largest
say the question again.
the
Airshake, the
largest
Coinbase super
the
PAC,
largest
was the largest donor in the
yes
election. They probably played a
yes
pivotal role in both getting Trump elected and a lot of people in Congress on both sides of the aisle.
yes.
Yeah,
The question is
absolutely. I
that
mean,
dirty
that's
money?
why the
So
well, I don't know if it,
the direct
I wouldn't
question
call I wouldn't call
Simon, is: are you saying
it,
that?
is the crypto lobby dirty?
Yes, that's what I'm asking you directly.
Who's behind it? Give me specifics.
Andreessen
But I
Horowitz,
asked you a question.
Ripple, Coinbase,
You're answering a
Paradigm.
question with a question.
Yeah, no,
Like,
no, okay. No, give me the specifics. So you're asking me, is the crypto lobby dirty? I
but
know
I'm
many of the players. So
but
if you tell me who they
but
are, I can tell you whether I think they're dirty or not.
but I'm not I'm not putting forward this theory, Simon.
Yeah, but I'm
you're
not putting
So
anything
this,
about
this,
the
no, no, but
crypto
this is the
lobby.
problem. You did put forward a theory that they largely got Trump
yes
elected. That dirty money
yeah.
largely got Trump elected. And then we point out
Yeah, but
the single
hold
biggest
on. I
amount
didn't say I
of quote
didn't put
unquote dirty
forward.
money, and you say, I don't know if they're dirty or not. I mean, how
Yeah,
that's
but
there's
you're
a huge
talking about the
contradiction.
crypto lobby.
No, we're talking
Joe?
about the prime. We're
You're
talking about one of the biggest donors in the last election, and you made a claim. You
how
made a
much did
claim,
they
and now you're walking away from it.
contribute? How much did they
The
contribute?
the
How much did they
biggest
contribute?
the biggest.
How
It was
much?
the largest super PAC.
It's
I don't have the
$140
figure to
million.
hand.
It was
Yeah.
140 million.
Okay, so that was significant, yeah. But there were four different then backers, and then you can look at the policy, you can look at the big beautiful bill, and you can look at the Genius Act, and you can trace back who got him in power and what happened. And so
Actually, you can't.
you
The
had the
So
crypto lobby
crypto.
got
can
almost
you
nothing. The
answer
crypto
Sam's question?
lobby got
Can you answer?
everything rejected in the big beautiful bill that the crypto lobby wanted in the
Can,
big beautiful bill.
can you just answer Sam's question? He asked a very specific question. Sam, ask it again.
So if your theory, Simon, holds water, the most powerful position in the world is President of the United States. Okay, and the
No,
largest
it's
donor.
not. No, it's not.
It's
He works for
well.
his lobby.
Can you let me finish? The largest donors to Trump's campaign, and I would contend the reason that he got elected was the super PAC affair shake. And I asked you a direct question: are you saying that all of the money that came through a fair shake is dirty money linked to crimes against humanity, Jeffrey Epstein, yada yada yada? It's a direct question. It's a yes or no.
Not that I'm aware of. No.
So why is it that if everything in the world is linked according to your conspiracy, that a position like the President of the United States can be elected with money that's outside of that system? That's where your theory doesn't hold water.
Yeah. So, but who puts these people there in the first place?
Who puts what
So
people where?
Yeah, who puts these people for you to vote for in the first place? Are you telling me they just come out of nowhere and they're not sponsored?
Donald
Where
Trump
did
has
JD
talked about
Vance
running
come
for
from?
office for decades.
The
Yeah.
entire Republican establishment was allied against Donald Trump when he ran in 2016. They were cutting off funds to his vote builder system so he could even do voter access. He raised a fraction of the money that some of the other candidates that were throwing gobs of money like Jeb Bush raised. And if you were talking about like the establishment players, they were not Donald Trump. He was not the establishment candidate in 2016.
Okay, Pierre,
Okay,
Pierre,
but
Pierre,
then
Simon,
let's look down
hold
his
on,
actual backers, right? So you
Simon,
got the
hold on one
let's look
second.
down his backers and what he's done.
Just hold on 1 second, please. Pierce has had his hand up for a while. Pierce, go for it. Pierce, guess not. Go on, Simon.
No, I'm here. Just my phone was away from me. Yeah, interesting conversation, guys. Like I gotta kind of lean towards what Simon is saying here with the whole Epstein being a blackmailing operation, and a lot of the politicians, elite people being involved in it. I mean, the evidence definitely goes in that direction. But the thing I think we're missing here is that everybody keeps saying, "Oh, it's about the money. It's about the money," and up to a certain level, it definitely is about the money. But once you get to the very top, you're dealing with the people who are the ones creating the money, right? So for them, it's not so much about the money, it's about the power systems of control that they can put in place with that money, and also the technologies that they're going to create with that money that is going to give them life extension technology that they believe will eventually get them to live forever and eventually even reach the level of being like a god, right? And it's kind of like that age-old tale, like the search for the Holy Grail or alchemy. The people at the very top, they still have that as their goal, and the money for them is just a tool to achieve it to reach this level of godlike supremacy. And that's where things like AI,
Where is it you
transhumanism,
learned this about the life
gene
extension
altering
stuff?
technology.
Where's that coming from?
What's that?
Where is it you learned about this life extension thing?
Oh, well, you can just listen to any of these top scientist tech guys. You listen to any of their YouTube channels, that like they're all talking about, oh, soon we're going to be living forever. Jared Kushner has even famously said we're going to be the last generation to die, or like the previous generation will be the last generation to die. This is all over the tech industry right now. Is this even this Brian Johnson guy, the whole "Don't Die" movement, all this
Yeah.
stuff?
So
These guys.
rich people spending their money on longevity. How does that connect to that is the control system for the money?
Well, it doesn't take too much of logic to realize not everybody can live forever, right?
Well,
And
it
the people
depends
at
what the
top
breakthrough
realize
is.
that. So,
If it's something cheap like CRISPR, why not everyone?
oh, well, because then you run into the problem of too many people, not enough resources, not enough houses,
I mean, if you
all
look at
this
what some
type
of
of
these
thing,
people like
right? So if
Elon Musk
everybody
say,
lives
they want
forever,
to go to a different planet, right? He wants the human race to be a multiplanetary species, which is not doesn't really
exactly,
line up with the
that's a part of it.
overpopulation.
No, that's a part of it, right?
Also, if
For
you listen to
sure.
most of these
They
rich
want to
people
get.
in general, they are fixated on low birth rates as a big problem. They think we're going to have an underpopulation problem, not an overpopulation problem.
Well, that's like 50-50. You have some like Elon Musk saying low birth rates, guys like Bill
Peter
Gates
Thiel
saying
also
we want
saying
to
low
get the
birth
birth rate
rates.
down.
Guys, we're getting pretty deep into this fucking insane stuff. I mean,
yeah.
The point I'm trying to bring up here is at the very top, it's not about the money, right? It's about
Right,
what
but
the money's going to be used
right, but
for.
it sounds like
And these people
you're
at the
making
top
that up.
have an agenda.
Well, I personally
It's
believe it
not made
is
up.
because it comes down to quarterly annual reports on the stock market, and every 2 years the politicians have to get re-elected. So there's no longevity in any strategy as a result of that. And you are subordinate to shareholders, and shareholders is ultimately if you come in with a cabal religious ideology into a public company, I think the governance structure prevents things like that in general prevailing. So it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be as crazy as that. But if you can profit from that, then I definitely believe that there is a portfolio managed scenario where they would play out the different scenes that could happen.
I think there's a strong sort of natural human desire to have like one elegant explanation for everything that feels scary or weird or out of your control in the world. And I think, part of the problem with Epstein is there are some genuinely fishy things, right? The idea of how Epstein went from being a teacher at the Dalton School to as fabulously wealthy as apparently he was.
And
Even if
how
he
did
had
he,
a high
Zach? Have you
power,
studied that? Have you
yeah,
studied it?
I think that is
So
genuinely
he was handed the full Lex Wexner
hold
estate,
on,
right?
hold on.
Let him
Like,
finish.
I think that genuinely is mysterious, right? I do think that Lex Wexner is part of that story. I think something fishy was genuinely probably going on, and totally reasonable to ask questions about that. I think the idea that after he was a known suicide threat, that the guards were looking the other way and he killed himself, that also is very weird. I don't fully know what to make of it, but there are absolutely strange things in the Epstein case but the idea that you can go from there and do your own research on the internet to come to a wide ranging, here's what explains everything bad about the money supply and wealth inequality and war around the world and all this. And it's all these guys
But
in the other
Zach, I
room.
don't do
Hold
that.
on.
I
All
don't
these
do
guys
that.
in the other room, right? Who those guys are depends, I think, on your personal psychology. If your focus is like on wealth, maybe the guys in the room are asset managers. Other people, if you're worried about mortality, it's the people who are going to live forever. With other people, it's the aliens or the whatever. Like, I think this is a natural human reaction, but I think that when you indulge that too much, when you really index into not what do we know, what are the actual facts that we have, right? Even in sort of suspicious circumstances, which Epstein was, if you just lean into I need one explanation that fits everything, that can take you down a pretty dangerous path where you start believing wacky stuff.
Yeah, but you'll always be behind Zach. If you're waiting for everything to be known in the moment, I would have never found Bitcoin
Well,
until
why don't we
today.
start with what we know?
Exactly.
I
You
think
can
you can
start with
get.
what.
I think you can get
so
to.
let me ask you a question. I never asked you a question, so let me ask you a question. I see that you're head policy of BT's Institute.
So I know you're a Bitcoiner. How do you feel when people, I mean, there's a big portion of Bitcoiners that say separate money and state. So how do you feel about that statement?
I think that is core to what Bitcoin is and what makes Bitcoin so powerful. It separates the money supply from control by a state or a government. I think that's terrific.
And Zach,
Do you think that
who pays your bills? Who do you primarily work for?
Well, I primarily work for myself. I have a law firm. I work with a lot of
And
Bitcoin
who
startups.
pays your money? You don't pay yourself. Who pays your
I
money?
do pay myself from.
Okay.
I have clients, right? I
Yeah,
run
and
a
who are
law
your
firm.
clients? Who are your clients?
Companies and investors.
Are they from a specific sector in Bitcoin?
Yeah, a lot of Bitcoin, a decent amount of non-Bitcoin crypto companies and some VCs and some angel investors. I
Okay,
do.
so you work for Bitcoin companies, as in they pay your bills in your freelance consulting business,
A law firm,
and
yeah.
as a law firm. And so would you say primarily you have a clientele that if you spoke against them, it would be problematic for your financial interest?
That
I
is
don't
true of
really know
any
what that
person.
means or what the implication here is, but
That is
Well,
true of
I'll give
any
you.
person in the world. Like literally anybody who work. If you work for an insurance company and you speak out against insurance, you're probably going to have a
Yeah,
financial.
exactly. I'm
but I
not
guess the
putting a
point is, and
conspiracy theory
the
to
reason I
it.
also work with the Bitcoin Policy Institute is I'm not just in this to make money. I do think that Bitcoin is good for the world. I feel like it's important for
Sure,
me to
no.
be part of the
What my
Bitcoin
line of
movement.
questioning was, we're not trying to say that's a conspiracy theory. I just believe that money motivates people a lot, and there are conflicts of interest. And if people would disclose those, I spent my whole life disclosing conflicts of interest that I have. Whenever I talk about a company, I always disclose, oh, by the way, I'm a
If you run
shareholder
for
in this
any
company.
public office in the United States, you have to disclose conflicts of interest, even
I
down to the
know, but
local
now
level.
we're on Spaces, Joe. Who primarily pays your legal fees? Who's your biggest customers?
I think by volume, there be companies.
Yeah,
It's
what
some
type of companies in a particular sector?
financial
The
services.
Fed,
Financial
Okay,
services.
would you say banks or other types of financial services?
Banks would not be among my top 3 or 4. No.
Which is the top of your top financial services person that pays most of your
Would
business?
largely be insurance services entities.
Okay, so it's useful for people to know that, right?
I
That probably Joe couldn't speak badly because it might impact his business if he talks badly about a certain sector. It's useful to know that, right?
I
So
think it's
first of all, let me resist your premise. A big part of the reason I work for myself is I like to be able to say whatever I want. And I'm not shy about my opinions that I have in the Bitcoin space. And sometimes those opinions that I have as a private person probably run counter to what some of my clients believe. I'm totally okay with that. They pay me
Sure, but
because I'm a
working for
good lawyer.
yourself,
They don't pay me to espouse
doesn't
their
mean.
talking points.
But look, come on, Zach. Like, I know there may be ignorant people in the audience, but we know what a self-employed business means. It means that you work for your customers, and if
Sure,
you
I
say
provide
bad
legal
things for your
services for my
customers,
customers.
yeah. So just stop like the gaslighting. There is a reason why I ask these
I'm
questions. I
rejecting the
think people
implication
should
that
disclose.
constrains what I say about
yeah,
my
and
beliefs
I'll
in
Okay,
just tell you,
Bitcoin.
now let's
I'll
look
just
at
tell you,
Bitcoin
Simon,
policy. Now let's
just
look at
from
Bitcoin policy. Who pays your bills at the Bitcoin Policy Institute?
Bitcoin Policy Institute's a nonprofit. It's a
Yeah,
foundation
but who pays the bills? Where does the revenue come from?
from donors.
Okay, who are the donors?
We've already literally you and I had this conversation a couple of days
Yeah,
ago.
but let's
It's
have it in front of
all
everyone else. Who are the
it
donors?
is companies and high net worth individuals in the Bitcoin space.
Okay, so high net worth people in America, would you say?
It's yes, it is. And
Okay,
you can
and
read our Form
what
990.
type
I'm
what
not going to
type of
go into
company?
I'm not going to go into the granular details of
Well,
who
I
our
think
donors are
it's useful
separate
to
from
know
our
because
regulatory filings.
if somebody is representing a Bitcoin policy and they are paid by Coinbase, I think it's useful to know that because what they say and what they do will be based
I
upon
have
what there
I have
is.
a
And
long record
if
of
you're
of
trying to
being
say it
I
doesn't
have a
matter,
long record
you're
of being
simply
critical of
incorrect
Coinbase.
on that. You're simply incorrect, Simon. There are plenty of entities where I take issues that are opposed to what the views of the entities are. And for you to say that, oh well, whoever's on the take, that influences, yes, it influences people. I think it definitely is in the back of their mind. But the notion that nobody can say anything if it may offend someone who is their customers. If my customer is offended by one of my views, they can take their business elsewhere.
yeah, but
I
I'm
mean,
not.
honestly.
I understand there's nuance on there. It's not a perfect science. But what the point that I'm trying to say is, a lot of what people say and do is dictated by who pays
No,
their
you're
bills.
making kind of sideways allegations that we are
It's not
bought and paid
because
for, which are just not true. I'm very
if
open
people,
about what my
I'm
views
not
are.
making allegations. I'm just saying if the
You
Bitcoin
could say a
policy
potential conflict of interest.
if the
That's all you could say.
Bitcoin,
It's a potential
yeah,
conflict
but
of
this
interest.
goes right down to my theory. When you follow the money, you don't get a perfect science, but you do get an understanding of why people say what they say and why they think certain things are inconceivable.
But
Because
Simon, the lawyer, Simon,
my whole
Simon,
theory, and what I've done my whole life for 25 years is try to follow the money and make sure that I'm not in a
Si-
conflicted position to the
Simon,
extent that I can be.
Simon, the lawyer who spoke from New York. I think you're a little disingenuous to that man. To say that he's on the that he's a puppet for his clients.
I didn't say that. I was
No, he's
trying
never.
to ask
He's
him.
never said that.
Well, you suggested that the people who pay
But
his
why
bills,
is that offensive? We should ask more
he
questions. And if
because
you
we live
don't,
in a
this is the
because we
Bitcoin ethos. Don't trust, verify.
because Simon
Understand
because
conflict. All the
because
shit
Simon
coiners are doing it.
be,
They're saying, "I, this is
Simon
what our
You are an
problem
Simon
is."
here's the logic,
Simon. The
Simon.
problem
Simon,
is
you're an investor in a company, Celsius, that defrauded millions of people. Therefore,
Correct.
you must be on the take, and you must have supported people that are defrauding people. You must have been part of the
Well,
elaborate conspiracy to take Bitcoin from
many,
regular hardworking people because you supported an entity that defrauded, I don't know how many, 10,000 different people,
650,000.
650,000 people. So therefore, you must be
Yeah.
corrupt. You must be a bad
And
actor in the
Joe,
space because you're
and
trying
Joe,
to deprive people. That's is the logic you're implying, which is
hold
total
on, Joe. Hold on,
nonsense.
Joe. That was the default position when I was disclosed as the seventh largest creditor, and Majinsky owes me 45 million. And when I was disclosed as the seventh largest creditor, and everything went public, and I spent significant time making sure that everyone understood my role, what I knew, what I didn't know, and I spent significant time doing
And
that.
you
And
think
I
everyone
work
believes
on a
you? You
disclosure
think everyone
basis.
believes you? Do you think why should we trust you?
Uh, by the
You
end
were
of it,
part of a
when I spent
conspiracy to defraud hundreds of thousands of people of hard-earned money. So why should anyone believe anything you say?
because I filed all the documents in the court and I spent 2 years supporting the victims and I rallied against the
You had an
team and
incentive
made
to do
sure
that.
that they ended
You
up
were
in
on
prison.
damage control to repair your reputation. I mean, listen, I don't. I'm not trying to cast aspersions at you. That's my point. I'm trying to illustrate the flaw in your logic, which
Well,
is a
also the
substantial
other
one.
thing that's missing here is
But
specifically if you're talking about Joe.
I'm not
Hold on,
saying it's a
Simon. Hold on
perfect,
one
but
second. The other thing that is missing here is Joe and I have a long record going back years, going back in my case definitely before I was part of BPI, of what my views on Bitcoin are. Right? If like I've been very consistent on that. I've been very critical of things that I am critical of, like Coinbase and crypto. Right? Even though I do work in the crypto space. I'm not shy about being critical of anyone. As anyone who's seen me over the last week, I'm not conflict averse, right? If you think that I am pulling punches on something because of my bags, let's talk about what that thing is in particular.
I'm not
But
saying
you
that.
making
I'm
these
saying
oblique
just
kind of
if you,
half
I'm just
allegations
saying
is an
disclosure is
underhanded
better.
tactic.
And I'll just tell you,
No, it's not. I'm
there
not
have been
saying that.
Simon.
I'm
There,
saying that Joe spends day in, day out defending banks, defending the
it's not
system,
true.
and mimicking
That's totally
and
not true, and
trying
it's
to
an
make.
underhanded attack, which is not
Joe,
correct.
Joe,
It's not an
Joe,
underhanded
Joe,
attack.
Joe.
You
Let me be a
literally
witness. Let me
anybody
be a
anybody that
witness.
speaks out against the system and
No, anybody
exposes
who
it
promotes
for.
baseless
Simon, let me be a
accusations. No,
witness in Celsius, please.
listen.
Joe, are you gonna let?
Guys, one at a time. It's a good conversation, but let's
Yeah,
respect
yeah.
one
And I
another.
just want to
Just
say
stop.
because I went through all the Celsius saga, and Simon was there on the front lines for 2 or 3 years. So don't mention that.
All right, that's
He
not
doesn't
how it's gonna
understand
go,
the point. It's not. I was not
guys.
attacking Simon about Celsius. I believe Simon wholeheartedly in his position that he was an innocent victim in that. That's not the point. The point is that he had a financial interest in the entity, and the mere financial interest in the entity does not mean that you are in some way complicit in their activities, which is the core of his argument and suggestion against Zach and myself. But I will point out the fact that you point out inaccuracies in conspiracies and arguments that lack a factual basis does not mean that that is only driven by your financial interests, which is what you're suggesting to me, because I point out when people inaccurately describe both the system, our economic system, our monetary system, and I point out that some of the arguments they make are nothing but speculation. You say that's only because of a financial interest, and I disagree with that.
Let me clarify my position. Let me clarify my position. I'm not saying it's a perfect science. I'm saying follow the money.
That's
It gives
just
you
a
clues.
dodge. It's not a perfect
It's not
science,
a
but
dodge.
directionally we know that you're corrupt because of the things I'm
Yes. No,
implying.
but hold on. No, no. It's not a perfect science. It's a methodology that investigators use, the FBI will use, the any crime investigator will start with normally following the money, and it's the same place that I start with. When I try and figure out what's happening, I follow. I mean, I think it was even the best in one of the best investors in the world. What was it he said? Show me the incentive, and I'll show you the market, or whatever it is. What was the? Uh, can anyone remember the phrase? Show me the incentive, and I'll show you the outcome. That's it. Berkshire Hathaway. So all I'm saying is, I'm not saying that this is a perfect science, and yeah, lawyers can come up here and put me under interrogation. But all I can say is that I will follow the money. I will study
Not being
things hard.
interrogated, my friend.
I'll
There's
look.
questions
Okay,
being asked. This is not, you see, this
sure.
victim rhetoric is not helpful. We're having a conversation,
Well,
a frank
I'm
one.
not a
And
victim.
well, you're acting like, oh, I'm being interrogated. We're asking tough questions, fair. But this is not
Yeah, for
interrogation. You can leave any time, sir.
yeah, sure. Okay. Um, so and I will give you the source materials to the people that have spent decades studying it. And I think people should study these things because I think you're being lied to consistently by people that want you to do things that are going to be harmful to your interest. And we're talking about crimes that I think the whole of human society and the social contract have said are unacceptable. And so if you want to take these things away and do the study, then I'll give you the source materials. But I'm
Every
just
time I've
putting
looked at
together
one of your
people that
source materials, it has been, in many cases, incomplete, having a lot of speculation. It's connecting dots where.
which ones? Get
Well, Whitney
specific.
Webb,
So
Whitney Webb, for example, in her book about
have you read both volumes of Whitney Webb?
I don't know
This
both volumes.
tactic of unless you've read every fringe conspiracy PDF on the internet, you can't have the conversation is super
I
lame.
didn't say fringe conspiracy.
No,
I'm
no, but
talking
every
about
time Joe
published
answers your question,
sources.
say, "Have you read this other thing? Have you read this other
Yeah,
thing?
but
Have
he's
you read?"
saying
No,
that he
like
has.
that's
He
the
said
tactic.
every source you give is incomplete. So
Simon,
therefore, let's look at the source.
So,
Simon,
so
if
the
There are two
one
volumes
nation
to
under
Whitney Webb.
blackmail. She cites
Yeah, did you?
in one nation under blackmail. Webb cites 2 interviews with individuals, one of whom has a long history of giving false statements, both to authorities and to others, as the entire basis of the connections with Epstein. 2 interviews. That's it.
Fine.
That's the
Fine. Okay,
entirety
Joe.
of Webb's
Now
analysis.
be now. Okay, now Joe, be honest. Did you read the 2 volumes, or did you just read an article that told you what you just said?
I've read the chapters where she talks about the source material. Yes, chapter 11 and what is it, 13. So I read those
Okay, so
directly. So
you
yes, I did not read the entire book. Correct.
okay? All right. So if you are interested in Jeffrey Epstein
If you think
and
that
you would
there is
like to be,
smoking gun material that Joe's missing, why don't you actually talk about what that
And I
is
would love
and
to see
not
it.
footnote 37 of page 384 on some weird come on.
It shouldn't take hundreds of hours to get to the bottom of a factual presentation of the connections about Epstein. It should not take that. I'm sorry. I disagree. I think if it was very clear, you can articulate. If you don't, the old saying, if you don't understand it, and if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it. That's basically the phrase, which I think is meriting our conversation here.
Hey,
If you
Joe.
could simply explain the connection, I think a lot of people would find it to be very credible. But you
okay,
can't.
but
Simon, there's a lot
I
of
would
people in
like
this
to
space.
bring up on a space the person that I believe. I don't want to do an injustice around it. I've read his work. It's not my area of expertise that I've dedicated 20 years to studying. And so I can bring that person up and I read their work and I put it together with my understanding. But if you're going to interrogate me on the specifics of Jeffrey Epstein, I remembered
No
what
one's
I read at
interrogating you.
the
We're just
time that
asking
I
you
was
to
reading.
plainly state what you think.
Yeah,
And this is
but
a
I'm not the
torturous exercise for some reason.
okay. Well, what I am trying to do, Zach, is I'm trying to point you to the people that I respect that have spent 20 years
But
studying the
after
subject.
you respect them, you've read them for 20 years, how come you can't simply articulate what it is that they say that you find so compelling?
Simon, you
I
have to
think I
expect to be
have, but
interrogated.
then you try and get me
No,
into
you
the
didn't. You're like,
minutiae and the
well, I use this
details and the source.
methodology of follow the money, and then Peter Thiel had lunch with this guy one time, and have you read this 800-page book? And
See, Zach, you see what you're doing there? So I tell you what I think the thesis is.
no,
Then you want the
that's
specifics
not the
of the
thesis.
detail.
Go
Then I tell
read an
you.
800
Then
page
I
book
tell
to see what
you.
the thesis.
Simon, you have
to give me an example, Simon, like I am not Milton Friedman, right? But I can explain his view of monetarism versus Keynesianism. I can do it.
Sure.
I can give
And
it very
I
simple.
can explain the subjects that I spent my whole life studying it very simply as
You
well.
just said that
But
to explain Epstein, you need someone else to come up and advocate for
correct,
your
that's
theory.
not my topic, but I am trying to further the conversation and I'm trying to point you to documentaries that can simplify it down. And then I'm giving you the full source materials for those that want to really
but
dedicate themselves to it.
But Simon, if you're going to further a conversation, you're not willing to accept any other point of view. And I go back to what I said. You're suggesting that a lawyer in New York is corrupt because his book of business are involved in finance.
I'm not saying that at all.
Well,
I'm saying that
that's what
Joe
you said
has a
today.
consistent theme in his message, and
And
it
and
is
I
in. And I'm
I would
asking
like.
who his clients are.
There are a lot of people in this space who have made a lot of money. We haven't been to Epstein's Island. We're not in bed with BlackRock. We're not signed up to some eyes wide shut type inner society, secret society. I don't get what your point is. It's a conspiracy. I'm happy to engage in conversation, but you can't
Hold on,
accept.
hold on. My whole point. My whole point is for people. I would like people to understand, at least structurally, the sources of power structure that I believe prevails, and I presented that. But people take you down lots of different stuff, and suddenly you're talking about all sorts of subjects, and now you're saying that I'm saying something that I'm not.
Simon, do you believe
I
that
came up here
Simon,
because I said,
do you
here's where you
believe
can find. Yeah.
do you believe that people can make money without being in bed with these people?
Yes, absolutely. And I've spent the last 15 years of my life trying to help people make money without getting into bed with these fraudsters.
But what you're saying is you can't make money through traditional methods.
No, that's not what he's
without
saying.
supporting these
I've never said that.
That's not what he's saying. Thomas, go for it. This is absurd, guys. Thomas.
So I was going to say that if you elevate this conversation up to a higher level, there is a large group of people who would be categorically called conspiracy theorists. I don't like the term, but it's people.
Who was it made up by, Thomas?
It was made up by the CIA and the COINTEL. They're the ones who drove it up in the 1960s after the Kennedy assassination, and no one believed the Warren report. But what I'm saying is, there is a large group of people who reject the common narrative, and because they reject it, doesn't necessarily mean that they understand exactly what else might have happened. And oftentimes they go down rabbit holes speculating on what that alternative reality would be. Like, instead of the common narrative, which is complete bullshit, if you think of the Epstein issue is what's being presented to us officially, that is the biggest ridiculous. Now, to then further speculate that it's Israeli Mossad doing children's sacrifice and harvesting adrenochrome, maybe that's true. It's possible, but to hang your hat on exactly a speculation without having the evidence is difficult.
Thomas, that's a good constructive exercise. Please tell me what you think. What should our framework be for segregating the people that maybe distrust the mainstream narrative from the people who engage in outright, I think, fabrication of theories without any evidence as to how the world works? What framework should we use to apply to analyze that? How should we separate the guys that are just making it up and trying to get some popular fiction out there about how the world works versus people that are, questioning of the official narrative?
Yeah, so I would say, Joe, I put me in the camp of somebody who rejects the official narrative for lots of reasons.
Sorry, just so we know, we're talking about the official narrative on any specific thing or on how the world works in general?
In general.
So
I would just say,
like how the government really works, how money really works, what doctors say. Basically, you're down for all of the mainstream conspiracies.
Let Thomas finish his thought.
Why don't you let him finish, man?
Yeah, I wouldn't take it to the extreme, Zach. What I'm saying is, when we're presented with what's going on with Epstein, or what's going on with the Ukraine war, or what's happening with the federal elections, whatever it may be, there's too many things that don't add up and don't make sense. Then we're left to speculate what might make sense. And most of these, what I'll call the conspiracy theories, and again, I don't like the term, but most of them are trying to put together the pieces, and typically they fall apart because it's not fully thought through, or it's missing some stuff. But the narratives that get pushed by the establishment are what's being rejected. And as a rule, the presentation of reality in the modern world through social media, through corporate media, through common narratives, is pushing an agenda. And most people in this space who fall into this category just reject that. And then you're left with what is the truth? I don't know. And part of it is a speculation. Is like, what might the Epstein thing be? I think there's a lot more to it than what's being told. And I reject Trump's point of view, where he says it's a nothing burger.
Yeah, but again, we're not. I want to go back to my question. I want a framework. Tell me a framework. How are we supposed to analyze this? Because there are people in this space here, and we talked about this last night, that can't even agree if we landed on the moon. They can't even agree if JFK is still alive. They can't even agree if Elvis is still in Albuquerque somewhere doing concerts. So if we can't figure out a framework to analyze fact from fiction and separate out, what is speculation, what is a theory, what is the official narrative, then there's no point in conversing.
I would say, Joe, I would quickly reject the person with the alternate view who is sure of themselves as much as I would reject the common narrative. The alternate views are speculations to perhaps consider things that are different than the common narrative. Use the moon landing as an example. You could say, for someone to then say, it was Stanley Kubrick who filmed it in Arizona, and the whole thing was a fake. That strikes me as inconsistent with logic across the board. But to then say there's problems with the official narrative, there's nothing wrong with that. Just to point out, hey, we're not being told the whole truth here, and as someone who's in government myself at a local level, it's not always malice involved in the public communication where you're trying to mislead people. It's that the packaging of the information that you share with people is incomplete and doesn't always lead you to the full story. I mean, I've been in this for 30 years. I've never seen a newspaper article, and I see I'm in the news. I'm in local news all the time, and they never get the story 100% right. They may get all the things right in the article, but they're missing key elements, or they get things absolutely wrong. But it's very common. So there's a lot of absence of malice on that. But we were talking largely about this Epstein thing. What we're being fed on Epstein officially from the Trump organization, and prior to that from Biden, is complete bullshit, in my opinion. Now, I don't know exactly what's true, but I can speculate what it might be. And my speculations would be high probability of being wrong, but there's no way I'm believing what's being fed to us.
Okay, but the problem is when you generalize that out as your worldview and you're reflexively skeptical of the official story because it's the quote unquote official story, right? Like, you work in local government. Local government spend a lot of time trying to get lead paint out of people's houses. And if you're like, listen, I'm not like an official narrative guy. Government says it's really bad for my kids to eat lead paint. They must be wrong. And so until someone definitively proves to me there's not a big conspiracy to take, lead paint, which makes us super smart, out of our homes, I'm gonna feed my children lead paint. You could see how that would lead to bad outcomes, right? And like, I agree with you. There is suspicious stuff about the Epstein case in particular. Like, I think it is more understandable there. But if you kind of just go in for any conspiracy theory because you want to question the official narrative, you're gonna have more misses than you have hits, and you're gonna end up with really bad information.
I disagree. I think our governments lie to us more than they tell us truth. I think our media lies to us more than they tell us truth. And I used to be like you, Zach. I used to work in the industry. I used to have my consulting business and my customers. And I've been somebody that believed in what I was told. But slowly but surely, I saw absolutely everything that I thought was the truth just became an absolute lie. And now we're hitting the record levels of deceit, deception. And now we're getting to the bottom of incredible crimes against humanity. And we're actually getting to the bottom of alternative versions of history. And I think everyone's finding that pretty difficult because everything they thought they were told, we've just been deceived to so badly. like so badly. Like just the thought, even just the structure of media and the operations that have happened. This is what happens when you lie like so consistently and so badly. You're going to get people that like, and you know, that's just the reality. Like, it, you know, just look down one strand and you find how different it is to what these lying politicians and what the media tells you. It's just so different. This is the result you get.
You keep saying obliquely this, but like, so where are you on lead paint? Is the government lying about that it's harmful?
Subjects I've never looked into.
But you'd be sort of reflexively skeptical that lead is bad for you to eat.
I pick my battles, and I stay focused on the things that I think relate to the map of the world that are in my sphere of possibility, and that's just way out of what I would investigate.
That's an extreme view, Zach, and it's not. You're more sophisticated than that. Well, we're not talking about every single word that comes out of corporate media or
okay. So
government.
which words would be skeptical of that?
Well, I would say things of consequence where there is
COVID, 9/11, those types of operations, big operations.
Vaccines, right?
A
Vaccines,
vaccine you
Thomas,
should definitely
right?
question.
They question all vaccines, right? They've only saved millions of lives, but just question them all.
Well, you should question them. Do you trust authority? The you know, you should question them, right?
No,
anyone that has a child should question them.
I'm being serious.
Do you not question the vaccines?
I think I question some vaccines. I think that by and large, vaccines have been a positive force.
You have a 5-year-old. You don't, when you bring them into the hospital or the doctor's office, you don't like do deep research on every one of those vaccines. And
I've looked at the vaccines that he's gotten. I think they're medically sound.
You trust them then?
Yes, absolutely. Now, do I trust the COVID vaccine wholeheartedly? No, I didn't. But you know, I also, full disclosure, got vaccinated with the COVID vaccine. So the reality is, like, you have to exercise individual judgment on these things, and I'm all about that. I think we can have a conversation. The problem is, and let me just finish here. The problem is, and what I was trying to get at from you, Thomas, is that there has to be some deference, I think, to subject matter experts on fields, because I cannot be an expert on vaccines. There's no way I can know everything there is to know about every single vaccine. So I will actually put some trust in other human beings who I think are trustworthy to guide my life. Okay, I'm not going to just go off and half-cock do a bunch of things without, you know, some. I mean, the very reason why you hire a lawyer is because you hope that lawyer, hopefully, is competent to represent you in a situation. You have to put your trust in that individual.
That's a fair point, but look, we all know experts are for sale, you know, and if you don't know who they are and what their motivations are, you can't say. But I think, you know, on the look at, you tell me if this is not an unreasonable point of view on vaccines. The industry lobbied during the Reagan administration for an exclusion of liability. Now they did it because they said, hey, we won't be able to do this. We won't be able to do vaccines without this shield. But, you know, that immediately creates a conflict there because, you know, now they don't have to worry about the efficacy or the downstream problems because they have an immunity shield. Now, that doesn't mean all vaccines are bad, but it certainly leads you to question everything after that point. And
the very nature of a conflict of interest is to be made aware of that and to understand it and appreciate it, okay, and make decisions informed by that. So the shield should inform some of your decisions. I totally disagree with that. That's why it was put in place, okay, because we know that these types of things will lead to a rash of lawsuits. But that alone should be weighted. Okay, that's the point. You have to weight all these things. You can't just categorically say, well, because the government says vaccines are bad or good, either way, we're just going to take the opposite view. That seems like a bad set of logic.
Well, it's a question of the place you start. If you start and you're closed-minded to being to looking at the counter narrative, whatever your point of view is. But it's just a question of where you start. You start from a point of trust or you start from a point of distrust. Now, the big pharma, because of the immunity shield, I would start from a place of distrust. There's too much money involved. And I would start from a point of distrust. And I'd want to be proved. I'd want to prove through the research and all the efficacy and all that kind of stuff before I would then trust it. I wouldn't start from a point of trust and then only look for things to make me distrust it.
Well, you guys are suggesting these firms haven't been already like fined to death. I don't know why you would trust any of these firms. United Healthcare
Gary, I
is under
don't.
investigation for fraud. We're treating these companies like they've been perfect up to this point. That's fucking ridiculous. Like, to trust anyone in the medical industry today who's ever given a vaccine out, I trust none of those people, Joe. The first thing I do is
Okay,
assume
so
they
just
don't.
let's
No, wait,
explore that.
Joe, don't interrupt me, okay? So I immediately will go into that field violently opposed to it, just like the alt market. I'm going to walk into that market assuming it's extremely dangerous. And I walk into every doctor's going, fuck, dude, this is a dangerous place. Statistically, it is a dangerous place, doctors' offices and hospitals. And it got worse in the last 4 years. And we're talking about trusting medical? Dude, I don't trust anyone in medical.
Well, is it
None.
possible the reason why doctors'
In fact,
offices
I
and
trust
hospitals
them
are
less than I
dangerous is
trust
because
the
sick people go there?
government,
Zach,
because the government, it was at
exactly.
least listening to the medical guys, and they assumed
But
that they
let's take
weren't
medical
being
for an example.
completely.
First of all,
Hang on, I wanted to respond to Gary real quick. Gary, let me just explore the trust. That's what I want to ask you. You say I don't trust medical professionals. If you are hit by a bus and taken to the ER, you're going to be damn sure you're going to be trusting any of those doctors to save your life.
No,
You're
we're
not going
not,
to
and I will
debate.
not
You're not
trust
going to
them. I've
debate
had
the fact
13
of.
surgeries, Joe. I've had 13 surgeries, and I got to tell you, it's one of my great fears of having to walk into another hospital that I have never, ever had a fear on. And if I go and get in a wreck, and I probably will end up in a hospital one day, I will be terrified, dude, for sure.
Being fearful is different from trust. You will put
No,
your faith in those medical
I will not
professionals
trust them. Okay, but
100%.
I actually trust that whatever's supposed to happen to me is going to happen anyway. So you make a lot of really weird hypothetical kind of thesis
No, it's
and
true.
try to box people into a trust. This is not the trust we're
You
talking
trust
about.
people all
I
day
will
long.
hope
You
I will hope when I'm in the fucking hospital that these people are actually good people and they've actually remind themselves they took the Hippocratic oath. Okay, I didn't take
so
the
if you want to
Hippocratic oath.
recharacterize that as
They
hope,
took the Hippocratic oath. This is to me one of the
you,
mortal sins of humanity, that a doctor or a nurse would take a Hippocratic oath, then stick a drug in somebody's body and not know what the fuck was in it. Irresponsibly, gross negligence. Okay, absolutely, bro.
do you think that's
Trust no
happening
one in the
widespread,
medical.
that doctors are giving people injections
I
of
think
what they don't know
I
what's in it?
think that if you're in the medical industry and you weren't saying, "Hey, this is bullshit," you were part of the problem, Zach.
No, but is this like a
Because
regular
just not
occurrence we need to
saying
worry about
something,
as doctors are giving you
not
medications they
saying
don't know
something
what they are?
is also a problem. Okay, it's as vital as a sin as doing something bad.
Well,
And you
okay,
guys
just to come back
pretend
again,
like not talking
to
about
stay
it
on
and
this one
not
particular
thinking
point.
about it. Yeah, well, let's just go look at the doctors that
Your claim is
were
that most doctors are injecting
boycotted.
people with drugs that they don't know what the drugs are or what they do. That's your
I
view.
think how many batches, guys? Let's go run it.
No,
Let's go
no,
run a
but
block.
I don't know
Dustin, maybe you
why
can
we're
tell
not
me how
answering.
many
This is a
batches,
pretty clear yes or no.
millions of fucking vials of poison were put in children and old people and middle-aged people all over the world. You're an idiot, dude.
True
You're
or not
actually
true
an
that
evil
doctors are
human
mostly
being.
injecting people with drugs they don't know what it is?
I probably think that's true, dude. Absolutely.
Okay. And do you think it's possible that the correlation between bad health outcomes and being in a doctor's office or hospital is that sick people tend to go to doctor's office and hospitals? Is that possible that that's what it is rather than a causal effect where doctors are mistreating people on purpose against the Hippocratic Oath?
seems pretty
Yeah,
obvious, Zach.
you've
I mean,
done
I
no
don't know how
research,
people
Zach.
miss this stuff.
Dude,
It's just so.
you and Joe are the only ones not getting this. So it's actually helping the audience understand what you guys are trying to do.
Well,
I don't know why you're
what
trying to do it.
what is it I'm trying to do?
You must be both very bored because you seem to both be really interested in agitating a group, and it's not. It's only going to be entertaining until it's not.
See that there's a
Well,
big
it's funny because Gary, I've got 17 DMs. Thank you for standing up to this nonsense. This makes no sense. Why do we let people like Simon talk on stage? So it's clearly not just Zach and I. There's a lot of people, and you can
Joe,
grade our
your
opinion.
DM,
Joe,
Your DMs
I
are
got 20 of those
Joe,
as well. So
your
look,
DMs, your
we're hard
DMs are
forking
not a
into a
speedometer
community.
of righteousness,
I
dude.
didn't say they were.
But
I didn't
also
say they were.
Joe,
But
look
you
at the
you
made
inflate
comments.
you
shit all
made.
the time, dude. It's
Gary.
ridiculous.
You made the
I have
claim
so
that it's
much
only
respect
Zach
for
and I
you,
that believe this. That's
and
not true. There are
you're
millions of
behaving.
Americans.
All right, guys. Take it easy.
No, it's just he makes a claim that it's only Zach and I, which
Yeah,
is
but
not.
let's
That's
go
a
one at a time.
disingenuous argument.
Let's go one at a time, please. So come on. Go ahead, Joe. Go ahead.
You can minimize a position, say it's only Zach and I, when I guarantee you there's tens of millions of Americans that think vaccines are safe and fine. And they may be wrong. Like, that's not to mean we're right, or we're just because we have numbers, right? With plenty of the majority can be wrong all the time. The point is for you to minimize and say it's only Zach and I trying to sow dissent. I really think that's not a fair comment.
So Joe, on this point, let's the issue goes back to this issue of conflict. So you would put your faith and trust in the doctors and say the vaccine stuff, where I might come at it and I would say the money in the system makes me question a couple things: the motives of the pharma, and when they've had a track record of having problems, and I'll use like Vioxx with Merck as an example, and doctors who I've talked to, lots of doctors, especially GPs, who cannot simply keep up with everything that's going on, and they rely on the information that's being provided from these conflicted parties like the big pharma. And so there's incentives, there's financial incentives for GPs to get a certain percentage of their patients vaccinated. They get bonuses. So I was like, well, wait a second. Are they giving me medical advice, or are they trying to hit a quota? I mean, it's a question.
Thomas, like, I think you're unfairly saying, like, you can move about the world and you can either distrust everyone or you can trust everyone. And that's a false dichotomy. The reality is you cannot move about our society. You can't do anything in today's world without putting some trust in another human being. It's impossible not to. If I send my kid to school or daycare, I have to put trust in another person. They can be thoroughly vetted. I can follow the money, like Simon says. I can do everything under the sun. But at the end of the day, I'm putting my son into someone else's hands that I have to trust them to do a good job. Just like if you hire a lawyer, you are in some degree trusting that person to competently represent you. There's no way to eliminate all trust. And there's this belief in, I think, a lot of people, in the Bitcoin space, that you can eliminate all need for other trust, that you can don't trust, verify. I think that's a bunch of BS. There's no way you're going to be able to eliminate trust in our system. There's always going to be some degree of it if you're going to live in a modern society.
Joe, I agree with what you're saying, Hunter. You cannot, if you're going to wake up every day and live your life with zero trust in society and your fellow man, you will be paralyzed and you'll be a crank, right? Likewise, on the other end of the extreme, and I don't believe these binary exist, but let's frame it up: the person who trusts no one and the person who trusts everyone. Wherever that reasonable balance is, or has been historically, is shifting, in my opinion, to less trust in society and institutions and in your fellow man. It's shifting.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing in your mind?
I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think it's ideal. It's not something I prefer. It is something that I do think is happening. And
I think it's a function of what we've learned about our governments, like, and that's the reality. Look, you just look at, like, Joe. Do you believe, like, do you actually believe that there are not powerful forces that are making a lot of money out of this Ukraine-Russia war that don't want this to end? Or do you believe that people just want this to end and they're just genuinely acting in good faith to achieve peace?
In my position, and again, we've had this almost, we've talked too much, so we've had this exact exchange before because I remember it vividly. And I'll answer it how I did last time. There are always powerful forces. There are always incentives that want war to continue, that want certain economic actors to win, that want certain economic systems to survive. That's always the case. Where I reject your view is that those are all powerful forces that can control the entire complex dynamic system of our world. The reality is there's many times where the most powerful interests actually have their preferred outcome not come to fruition. And I can cite examples.
I agree with that. There's a power struggle at the top. Like, military is being morphed into technology.
It's a societal struggle.
No, I disagree. The society have no impact. At the top is what's determining it. So, there is a struggle between the technical industrial complex, the military industrial complex, and the financial industrial complex. I think we saw that in Genius Act. I think we saw that in the fact that technology is moving more towards artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. There is a power struggle, and that's why I'm saying power changes and dynamics change. But I believe. Do you believe that if Trump wanted to end the Ukraine war, is it? Do you think that Putin's more powerful and he just can't get a negotiation done, or do you think there's a power within America that wants to profit from that war for as long as possible and
Okay,
benefit from the
you've
rebuild?
combined. It's a compound question. First, you were starting out saying, "Do I believe you believe Trump can end it?" Then you're saying, "Is there a power that would like it to continue and
Okay,
benefit?"
do you believe Trump can end it?
No, I don't.
And is that because of Putin or something else?
I think there are dynamics that are beyond the control that he has right now to solve the situation. It's not just Putin; it's also Ukraine, and
And
that's why.
do you think
And by the way,
Lockheed?
just for the record, we had folks several months ago who were very excited at when he, had that back and forth with the prime minister in the Oval Office, and they were convinced that that would bring about an easy end to the war. That this is all part of a grand
Correct,
strategy by
but
Trump to end the war. And what
sure,
happened?
sure, but I'm not a person that believes that politicians act in their own, independent. I believe that they're fulfilling a mission from their corporate backers. But do you believe that Lockheed Martin gets a say in determining whether Ukraine Russia war ends?
Gets a say. Can you
Yeah.
define that further for me? What
Do
does
you,
that
do you
mean?
think they're an
Do
important
they have
player?
lobbyists? Do they have people that are influential that talk to politicians and try to pursue their interests? Yes, absolutely. If that's what you're asking, correct. They absolutely have people that are. Now, do they have people that are overtly saying this war must continue to congressmen and senators? I don't believe that.
Okay.
Well, Simon, let's go back to this Russia-Ukraine theory. Didn't the Ukrainians and the Russians meet in Turkey a few months after the war started, with Sergei Lavrov meeting his Ukrainian counterpart? Didn't they agree to terms to a ceasefire with Ukraine pretty much giving up a portion of the Donbas region? And then the very next morning, the Ukrainians came back after consulting with I think the Brits, and ended up not agreeing to ended up changing their mind pretty much, just because some European superpowers and possibly even the United States um, pushed them and pressured them not to agree to the terms of a ceasefire. You remember that?
Yeah, so from my perspective, most of the European leaders that work for lobbies, and Trump that works for lobbies, and Congress members that work for lobbies, and Senate members that work for lobbies, I believe that they determined that if we can get the ECB and all the European nations to create another 850 billion euros, and we can get hold of $350 billion of seized funds held at banks, then at the end of that, when we transfer all that money via a big, beautiful bill over to Lockheed Martin, General Dynamic, Raytheon, Boeing, then we might engage in peace talks, but only once the finance companies get to vassalize as much of the land as possible. We get a deal on rare earth minerals, and then eventually we might get what our corporations need before we can ever even. But there's a narrative that we need to give to people to make it look like we want peace, because Trump can't actually create peace. Trump's not in charge, and there are corporate interests that determine that are on top of both the European Union, both America, and that's how I see it.
Dustin,
Can you guys hear me okay?
go for it.
I'm using my
Go ahead.
computer.
You're good.
So again, this whole idea of trust, what's interesting, and I get why people see it from different perspectives. Like Joe and Zach have been very successful by operating within the system, attaining, prestigious degrees, doing big practices. The system has largely worked for them in ways that it hasn't for everybody. But like, it's not the fault of the people who have lost trust for the lack of trust. And whether that's the media or the monetary policy or the government, they have done things to destroy their own credibility with people overwhelmingly. And my question on the vaccine issue, do you know how many of the people who are vaccinated, who did sign up to get it, are up to date with the current schedule? Meaning that I think at this point they have 17 or 18 boosters. Do you know what the official percentage is? 2% of the population. 2% of people are up to date on the current vaccine, COVID mRNA injection schedule. And so it's, of course, people can generally recognize that the goalposts moved. That first it was a vaccine that would stop transmission in its tracks, and if you took it, you were not going to kill grandma by spreading it over to her. And then further, right, they had to move the goalposts because people were getting it. Then it was, well, you won't be, you can still spread it, but you won't be, or I'm sorry, you can still get it, but you won't be able to spread it. Then that was disproven. And then they had to go to something that's almost completely and totally unquantifiable, which is, well, it'll lessen your symptoms, although there's really no way for us to focus it because the data isn't there. And so, of course, people have lost trust overall. And the idea of, like, if you get hit by a bus or you have a heart attack, there's a difference between chosen trust and who you want to choose to trust, and forced trust, where you're put in a position that you have no choice but to put your faith into something. Even if you don't really have trust in them, at the end of the day, somebody's still going to be operating on you and trying to save you. And I see the same thing over and over. I think it's the same with our soldiers in war, which is they sign up trusting that the government is going to put them to use to do things that benefit the world and the country. And really, though, they don't really know, and they don't know what the shift in leadership's going to be, or the shift in military strategy, or what we're doing. And so I get why there's not trust. I've lived a life that has led me to distrust many things, but I get why people want to have faith in these systems, and I want people to be able to have faith in the systems, but it requires that people stop lying to us and that we have independently verifiable facts that everybody, like objective truths that people can agree on. And we're not there, and that's why we have all of this anger.
I just don't think that's not a possible bar, right? So I think one thing likely we all have in common on this stage is that we think not only is the monetary system broken, but it's immoral. It is slanted towards the few at the expense of the many, and that Bitcoin is a good potential solution to that problem. Where I get off the train and where I start to worry about this community sometimes is, like, most of us came to that conclusion through rigorous research, rigorous debating, really pushing ideas back and forth, and arriving at that sort of counterintuitive conclusion that most of us didn't start with, and that in some ways, like, society does not tell you to look in that direction. That does not then make you an expert on, nutrition or pharmaceuticals or aerodynamics or geopolitics, or all of the things that, like, some portion of the Bitcoin community thinks that now that they figured out Bitcoin, they can DYOR on everything. And that because in the specific case of the monetary system, the official narrative is not the correct narrative, in our view, that is going to literally apply to anything. And I understand that, like, with Bitcoin, you can get down to a ground truth. There are facts you can ally on, you can reach consensus on, if you study it enough. That's just not going to be true of all sorts of specialized fields where you need experts. And are there cases where you should be skeptical of the experts or the official narrative or the government narrative? Yes, I think that, like, I don't believe in Simon's sort of single track of follow the money, but I do think thinking about the incentives is important, right? Like, who stands to gain from what, and if the best explanation for something is not sort of the obvious or stated explanation that person is giving, it's some sort of obvious incentive structure, whether or not the incentive structure is money, I think that's a fine thing to interrogate. But to take it farther and just be like, my default presumption is that the experts on everything are lying, and so I'm not going to avail myself of subject matter expertise. I'm not going to listen to the people who actually understand a subject. I'm just going to say, my contrarian take is right, and then go farther than that and scream at strangers on the internet who disagree with my contrarian take. That is not a good way to find the truth.
Yeah, but Zach, so the issue is, I would default,
Simon,
I'd
can I
certainly
follow up real
default
quick?
to an expert, but the problem is with that we're now finding out that experts lie and incentivize in different directions. So even when somebody's a complete expert, we're finding out that like these preserve, like there has been a real breach in the social contract.
So,
Yeah,
Simon, can I jump in here? Because
go
like
for it.
I came up in a way in politics that, right, like very much aligned with Ron Paul and counter politics or contrarian politics. And I've come up, I call it the red pill pendulum theory. So everybody has a moment. I think for a lot of people in here, it was Bitcoin and recognizing the brokenness of the fiat system, where you naturally start to question everything that you've been told, everything that like you were taught in school, everything that the media tells you. And I warn people that that is an incredibly vulnerable and dangerous moment, because the pendulum tends to swing not back to the middle, but to the other side, where you're still vulnerable to a bunch of bad information. Just because it's the contrarian position obviously does not mean that right, that you're going to find the best information in the bowels of the internet on some 4chan or Reddit thread. And so it's really incumbent on everybody. I think everybody should challenge everything that they get from both experts and from the other side. And we need, what I love about Bitcoin and blockchain in general is it allows us to actually verify data in a way that can be trusted again. And I hope we take what we've learned about being able to disrupt the fiat economy and take that and apply it to other places that require trust. Because I think the big revolution is proof of work allows for a verification level of trust that needs to be applied to media and government decisions and government contracts and military interventionism, all of these different things. We have new technology that allows us to lay those things out, because unfortunately people usually go from one side of the pendulum, which is where they're totally trusting and they're bought into the system, and then they go to the opposite side where they're like questioning everything, and then the hope is that they land somewhere in the middle and find a balance, because that's really what's necessary to make good decisions.
That's not really how a blockchain works. A blockchain does not allow you to verify things exogenous to the chain. It's a database. So the reason Bitcoin is beautiful is because on Bitcoin, you don't need anything exogenous to the chain. You don't need anything outside of the chain. I need to know this is my Bitcoin in my cold wallet. If you start adapting things that are outside of the blockchain database to Bitcoin, all you're doing is you're taking a very inefficient database and making it even more inefficient, and you're basically trying to tether it to something in the real world which could or could not be corrupted. You know, the fact that you have bananas marked on a blockchain doesn't mean those bananas exist in the real world. So I don't think that solves the problem you're raising. There's no no connection between distributed ledgers and verification of facts in the real world. Garbage in is garbage out.
Joe, I agree on the fact-checking nature of it, but censorship resistance and immutability is really and timestamps, right? Like, is the base level that we still don't get. Like the amount of information that people can't even agree on shit that happened in the last 3 years is wild. At least with immutability, timestamps, and censorship resistance, we have the ability to actually lay out timelines and like lay things out, because we live in a gaslighting society that's crazy. And so I do think it's a start. I do agree that maybe the Bitcoin blockchain as it's currently constituted is not the answer, but it's taking the underlying principles that led us to this revolution and figuring out how we can apply it to make the media more like trustable again. That doesn't mean perfect, but just again that we have some level of confidence that the media
but here's the problem. When you say let's make it trustworthy again, we go back historically. One of the reasons why the people trusted the media wasn't just because they were not telling the truth. They were telling the truth all the time. That's not correct. We know that there are mainstream media broadcasts where they said falsehoods. 1950s, 1960s, during the Walter Cronkite era, Simon will talk about Gladio, right? Like, just because people were more trusting does not mean that the information they were getting was any more or less reliable. So that's sort of a question I have. What you have is you have the proliferation of alternative media, which has quote unquote awoken people, right? It's gotten people on a different mindset that there's this other source of information. And the problem with that, which arises from a societal perspective, is we can't agree on anything. Before, it was very easy to agree when you got the news from Walter Cronkite, and whatever Walter Cronkite said was the story. Why would you question what good old Walter says? So the question in my mind is, in a society with all these different sources, both independent, Twitter, a lot of rejection of the mainstream narratives, we have to figure out how to decipher truth and facts. And I can tell you that, historically, a lot of people believe that your average common guy was unable, to decipher facts. There were, go back to, the philosopher kings and arguments in ancient Greece. They thought the regular man was simply incapable from a constitutional perspective of understanding what truth is, what reality is, what good government and good public policy is. They said, no, we want representatives. We want, people in a republic to come forward with the best and brightest who lead us. And the common man is incapable of figuring out how to deal with these issues.
Well, so Joe, on that particular issue, the people with the mindset of, right, like, oh, people are too dumb to be able to figure out like who to follow and who to have lead them, the censorship machine has been 100% wrong on what they've actually cracked down and censored people over. So like the stuff that a bunch of us have been censored over, specifically around COVID and the lab leak and the vaccine injections and their efficacy on all kinds of political issues, all of the time, every single time, the facts now lean more towards the people who were censored than over, right, that they were spreading quote unquote misinformation. And so it's really a dangerous thing for us to think that we're able, or we should somehow, because at some point, if we need to enforce established narratives and put trust in somebody, the idea that can be enforced.
I don't think anyone's advocating for censorship or enforcing a specific narrative. I at least speak for myself. I'm strongly against both of those things.
Yeah,
The point
neither am I.
is that doing your own research for most people, most of the time, is not going to lead to a good result. It's a much worse result than trusting the experts as a first resort on a given topic, right? Like, let's take the crypto space as an example. How many people do their own research? How many people do their own research?
I completely reject that.
You're just saying that people can't. You're just saying that people can't do their own
Most
research.
people
and
are
then
not capable of
coming
doing
with
their own
any kind
research
of
in areas
solution
that
as
have
to how
subject
facts
matter
are
expertise.
verified.
They're not.
No, Zach, you're not coming with anything. You're just arguing to argue.
Most
You're
people
not
are not
coming with any
qualified
sort of.
to have their own idiosyncratic medical opinions. They're not. They just aren't.
The people
Right.
who do
So
their own
come with
research
something.
are
There's
fine.
people out here
What
who
I'm
are
saying is,
trying to
by
come
default,
with some sort of
trust
solution, some
doctors.
sort of fact.
Here's the solution.
And then
Your
people
default should be listening
then
to
the
experts.
community of people come together and they say, hey, that seems like the best one that came out of this process. You're not coming with anything. You're just saying, well, people can't do their own research.
We are. There is such a thing. There is such a thing as scientific.
So you just went back
engineering,
on your own argument. You
no.
said trust the expert.
Yes.
There is such a thing as
you just contradicted yourself.
No, I said you shouldn't censor dissenting opinions or enforce the majority opinions. But I think as a mental model, people are better served by the default being trust subject matter experts and not trusting DYOR based on a Twitter rabbit hole.
And it's not just subject. There are medical consensus.
But the
there's
trust
engineering
comes with
consensus.
the
There's field consensus.
That's what happened with COVID. It came with a process of time of a bunch of people throwing and lobbing things up in the air. And then all of a sudden, these experts that said, no, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true. Oh, well, now it seems like that narrative that has been popping up out of the woodworks from everywhere else is now true. So that's the process of people doing their own research.
You know what's also always paired with consensus? Moving goalposts. Well, right, like, oh, there's a consensus. 95% of everybody agrees that the planet is warming. I mean, the climate is changing. I mean, it's cooling. I mean, actually, we don't know what the fuck we're talking about. And so, right, that anytime that there's a quote unquote consensus, there is enforcement based on like who gets the grant money to run this stuff. And my counter to Zach, and I think this is really important. the people who do their own research, who actually do their own research, almost always come to more customized answers, like especially around health. The people who suffer the most are the people who get overwhelmed, apathetic, and don't do real research and rely on quote unquote Twitter threads. But I think it's wildly over the top elitism to look down at everybody and say, oh, the people who they're not able or capable to do their own research. I know tons, hundreds, thousands of people
as
who look
between
into
the
things and come up with their
as
better answers.
between
They're
a and look, I'm not talking about COVID in particular, but just in a general situation where it's not as political as COVID, if it's like, a panel of Harvard trained epidemiologists on one side, and then a guy in the Twitter comments saying, fuck Harvard, it's too woke, these guys don't know what they're talking about, I think we ought to default into trusting the former over the
You
latter.
don't default into
Right, but
anything.
here's my question
You're
for you guys.
speaking black and white,
I
Zach.
genuinely want to hear I want to hear your answer
That's
to
the
the following
issue.
question.
No,
Is the
you're speaking black or
is
white
the
that you
end
have to
result
default into
is
both.
the
The
hold on
general
hold on
population
I'll
of
be done in
people.
1
Just let
second.
him
No,
talk.
Zach, I'm not going to
Let him
stop.
speak. Let him
The
speak.
general
Let me
Bob,
population
ask
of
one
Bob,
people
one
needs
second.
to be
Bob,
able to make
Hold
their
on.
own decision and look at a
Bob,
set of facts from
Bob,
both sides of
Bob.
those
I'll
You're
let you
gonna
speak
get
as
kicked
long
out.
as you want. I just want to ask this one question. Is the correct end state that you guys are looking for here that we need to reform whatever is systematically broken with the experts so we can have better experts to rely on? Or is the goal to just get rid of expertise altogether and everyone does their own research?
Who said that?
I'm asking you.
Who
I'm
said
asking
get
you
rid of
which
the
of those is the
experts?
desirable outcome.
But who
I'm
suggested it?
asking you which
Okay,
of those you
then
think is the
so since
desirable
you were
outcome.
talking over me last time, I'm gonna express what I was trying to say.
So
You
you're not going to answer the
suggested that
question.
there was two panels. You suggested that there was two panels, one with Harvard level experts and the other with random people who are doing their own research. What I'm suggesting is you are suggesting that there's a black and white, pick one or the other.
No,
The
no.
whole
What I'm
goal
asking
of
is
people
the
being
end state that we should be aiming towards getting better experts that we can
I'm
rely
getting there,
on,
Zach.
or is the end
I'm
state
getting there.
doing away with
I'm
expertise in
getting
general?
there if you'll let me finish. You keep asking me the same question. I'm getting there. So the ideal situation is that you do have experts, and then you also have a large community of people who do their own research and challenge those people. And then those facts arise, and the experts look at those things, and then the people who do their own research look at those things. And just like, again, like COVID, the truth came to the top. It rose to the top because of that process. So for you to sit here and suggest that you need to pick one or the other is just not even in a realm of reality.
Well, sometimes you do need to make a decision and you need to pick your source of truth, right? And you need to pick between the establishment experts and you need to pick between the, Twitter rabbit hole guy.
Why?
Because sometimes you need to make a
Why?
decision on what to do, like
Explain
taking the
why.
vaccine, for example.
In the Bitcoin case, I mean, if you listen to the expert for the last 10 years, you weren't holding
That's
Bitcoin.
true.
So
That's 100% true. I think
I
that's why we see
really
so much of
think
this in Bitcoin.
It's actually not 100% true. There are
Checkmate.
plenty of investors and people that were very well known in the financial community that did buy Bitcoin.
no, yeah, no, I didn't. I
Very
said you.
few. Very few.
I
Take
didn't
it
say
from
that.
someone that
I
was there,
didn't
Jay.
say.
Very few.
Yeah, no, I didn't say there weren't, VCs out there stacking Bitcoin.
Very
I'm saying
few.
you.
Very few.
The reason you haven't got into Bitcoin is because you were listening to the wrong experts. And the majority of the experts were telling you stay away from Bitcoin. It's a scam.
Yeah, as somebody that spent pretty much every single professional that I interacted with, everyone that worked at the investment bank that I interacted with, pretty much everybody told me I was absolute deluded. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's a scam. Stay away. All the shareholders of my business said pivoting the business to helping Bitcoin companies. Everywhere from every expert, they said absolutely you're making the wrong decision.
We also need to keep score. Like I have a whole host of doctors who challenged the official COVID line, and I am inclined to trust them more than I'm inclined to trust the doctors who went along with it.
Well, the question isn't about
the
what you're
same
inclined to do. It's what is more reasonable to do.
It's obviously more reasonable to go with the people who were right. Like why can't we? Why
Usually when
shouldn't
you're
we
having to make a decision, you
score?
don't know in advance who's right.
Come on,
Again,
man. Just look at the history of these institutes. Like, even then, like,
It's just
yeah, but
silly arguing for arguing's sake. Like there's a gray area, Zach. It isn't just one black or white decision you always
Sure, but we're
make and
talking
one
about
single
your
entity
Bayesian
that you
priors
always
here
agree with
about how to
or always
weight
have to base your decision
expertise
on.
versus contrarians on Twitter. right? That
Yeah,
is, it's not
you're
black and
just
white, but you do have to weight
repeating
those
like
two
the
things against
same
each other.
thing over and over again, and you're not evolving your argument from what other people are saying.
I for example, I have like family that like are sick and have been getting treatment, and I reach out to some of the contrarian doctors who also have certificates on Twitter to get other advice, and we've had great outcomes as a result. Like we've gotten different of what they were being offered or told, specifically around certain heart medications. Like I literally in the last 2 weeks, where I reached out to some of those quote unquote contrarians who were blacklisted and censored for having opinions that turned out to be right. And they were able to recommend things that they weren't getting from the doctor that they were seeing in the hospital. And we've gotten good outcomes as a result. I again, to completely dismiss the idea that the contrarians should be ignored and the trusted doctors.
No one's saying that. Again, that's a straw man. No one is saying ignore any piece of evidence. It's about deference.
Or censor.
False. Zach did just say that,
No,
Joe.
no, I didn't.
So,
I said you should weight the experts higher than the Twitter contrarians. You should weight them higher.
But to your
Okay, Zach,
argument again,
how do you, Zach, I'd like to ask a question. How do you take Trump's opinion that Netanyahu's a hero? What do you think is behind that?
I first of all, I don't know what that has to do with this, and I don't know what you're talking about specifically. What statement by Trump are you?
So Trump came out and called Netanyahu a hero
that is
while
Simon.
while they visited the White
that has
House.
nothing to do with the conversation. We're talking about trying to decipher.
Yeah, well, it's
a course
boring.
of
Like, let's move forward.
But
Like,
your commentary is about like, what do you think of opinion somebody else has said about somebody else? How is that relevant to trying to decipher a scientific or medical?
I want to understand. Zach, I like to understand who's standing up for the Bitcoin policy. I
So
get
this is
lots of
about
messages.
attacking Zach. This is about attacking.
Yeah, it's about understanding who Zach is, just like you can understand. So, do you believe there's a starvation campaign in Gaza right now, Zach?
I'm not going to get into Middle East politics.
It's not Middle Eastern politics. Is there a Gaza? Is there a starvation campaign in Gaza right now? You talk about Israel. You talk about Israel, Zach, all the time. So, why do you believe there's a starvation campaign in Gaza right now?
But by starvation campaign, you mean intentional effort to starve people?
Yes.
Not that I'm aware of, but I am not an expert. I wouldn't be the one to know.
Okay, so you don't see the Holocaust that I see right now.
I don't think I see something I would describe as a Holocaust now.
Right. So,
okay.
So to use your line of logic, Zach, use and weight the experts that you believe would be able to make the correct judgment on that, and then give your answer.
Based on the reporting I've heard, and I can't stress enough that I am not an expert on Middle East politics or what's happening in the Middle East. I don't speak for the Bitcoin Policy Institute.
It does matter, because here's why. You don't have to have an opinion on everything that happens in the world.
But Zach talks about Israel. He does have an opinion.
When do I talk about Israel?
He does have an opinion.
I have to have an opinion on what vaccines are injected.
But Zach does have an opinion. He discredited.
Right?
He does have an opinion
dynamic.
on Israel.
I don't control
Zach,
the Middle East peace
what's your
process.
opinion? What's your opinion on what Israel is doing right now, and why is Trump backing it?
Why is Trump backing it? Again, this.
Yeah, why is America? Why is America paying for what the highest court in the world has classified as a plausible genocide?
I will humor you and give you my personal opinion on that. I want to say I am not an expert. I do not have any inside knowledge on this, and I do not speak for BPI on this. And in fact, I disagree with people at BPI. My view on what Israel is doing is that Hamas is the bad guy in this war. I think Israel's not being careful enough not to harm civilians, but I think it is very hard not to harm civilians when Hamas is in a tunnel structure that they built that they keep their civilians out of. Right.
And you can't figure out that nobody's blowing up any tunnels when they're on tunnels, and all they've done is taken 70% of the land, and they've concentrated them in a camp now while they're starving them and haven't let them food for 3. You don't even follow it, but you comment on Israel.
I do know the stated aims of Hamas, which actually is to kill all the men, women, and children in Israel. Right. That is what they say. That's what's in.
That's not the definition of a genocide.
All right, let's get to something more fun. Come on.
Okay, I mean, look, those are.
No, I just want people to know who Zach is, and why is America? Why is America that's funding a genocide right now? Why is this a taboo topic? Why are you not outraged by what your government's doing right now? Why is it that that's a taboo topic that no one can talk about? When Zach talks about Israel, I mean, surely this is one of the most topical things that we should be
Well, I'm
talking
not sure what we
about.
mean by
There is
genocide because
literally
you
a
said
starvation
that
campaign.
killing every man, woman, and child is not genocide. So
If you were watching a Holocaust during World War II, would you say something about it, knowing that the American government is paying for it right now, and Trump called Netanyahu a hero, while literally there is a starvation campaign going on right now? Why is that not a topic when you're somebody that wants to talk about Hamas and Israel, Zach?
well,
Hey,
first of all,
hey,
I
Simon.
don't
Hey, Simon.
talk about
Hey,
Hamas Israel a
Simon.
lot in public. I'm giving you my view, which is that I don't see it the same way you do. I do not see it as a genocide. I think we mean different things by genocide. Since you just said that killing all men, women, children is not genocide in your view, I'm not sure
No,
what
just go
genocide
to
is.
you're a lawyer, go to the Geneva Convention
Hey,
definition of a
Simon.
genocide. There are 5 characteristics of
Simon.
what a genocide is, and the highest court in the
Simon.
world has ruled it as a plausible genocide. And
Simon.
you know that your government is corrupt, and you
Simon.
know it's connected to Jeffrey
I also
Epstein,
think you
Simon.
hate.
and you
I
know
think you
that
hate
all of this
America
is
in a different
connected
way,
right now.
and that
Simon.
might also be a political.
Point taken, guys. Let's rotate back to Bitcoin, maybe.
Well, let's get back to Bitcoin price. Come on, guys.
Yeah,
I'd like to
as
ask
soon as it
Simon.
comes to talking about the real issue and what America's funding right now, and how it
I'd
connects
like
to
to ask
Jeffrey
Simon.
Epstein, and
I'd
how it
like to
connects to
ask.
everything.
I would like to ask Simon. Did your government commit starvation in Ireland?
Yes, they did. And
Yes. Well,
my government is a fucking travesty in terms of its history, and they rewrote history in order to try and paper it up. And America did exactly the same as that power
it's not the
structure was
same.
transferred over.
It's not the same.
Okay, and I really appreciate the Irish for standing up for the genocide case and getting behind what the absolute crimes against humanity that the American government is paying for right now in Gaza. There is
Yes,
literally
but
a Holocaust.
yeah, yes, but the
Broadly
British
speaking, America
starvation.
is the good guy in the world, and I am supportive of the United States.
Okay, well, you're supportive of all the covert funding of terrorism and all the things
I'm
that I
not
try and
supportive
help
of
people.
everything the government
Simon,
does.
Yeah,
please.
because you
Broadly, I
don't
support
know.
the
You
government.
don't even know who
Simon,
funds Hamas. You don't know the subject.
can we please move on? Can we please move on to something else?
Yeah, Joe, always move on when it comes to talking about
No, it's
America's
not.
role in
No, you and
Israel,
I have had
because
many
in the
discussions. Okay,
world, it is the
for,
most important
okay. Well,
topic at the
I'll
moment
just state.
right
I'll just
now.
state for the record. I offered months ago to have a space dedicated to this with you, and you never took me up on it. And I did it several times.
Absolute bullshit. I told you to name the time and place.
Okay, well,
Now, if you wanted me to
we'll
organize
set that
it,
up
then
then.
fine.
We'll set that up because I don't have a problem defending the record of the United States.
But
It has many sins and there's many flaws, as
But I'm
every
talking
country.
about the sin of today, the sin of right now, the one that all Americans don't want to talk about, the absolute Holocaust and campaign of starvation. And actually, there is a company called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, GHF, that is actually funding via America the crimes against humanity that are being committed, systemically routing up Palestinians into a concentrated part of Palestine while Israeli IDF terrorists are shooting at them and massacring them. But your media doesn't tell you that. You don't care about that. That's the untalkable, because this is what props up the dollar. It's war, violence, death, and destruction. And your media covers it up. And that's the issue. That's the issue of the world right now. And no one wants to talk about what's
People
really
talk about
happening.
this all day long. There's spaces on Israel and Hamas all day long on here. I see you in there. Okay. So say no one wants to talk about it, I think is a little bit of a stretch.
Let's
I'm
all
talking
talk
about
about
people.
Go ahead, Simon.
Go.
Why would you say nothing about that? Are you happy with your government committing
No, I'm
a
unhappy
Holocaust
about a
right
lot of
now?
things in government, but I
I don't
have
get what we're
limited
supposed to do.
areas of.
Just yell about
If
it.
you're not on the ground seeing what's happening, you're not an expert in it.
And I'm not an expert in it. Okay, so I try not to talk about things that I'm not an expert in, unless I'm asking questions to try to be more informed. Now, what I will tell you is that there are many things the United States is doing, both domestically and internationally, I do not agree with. Okay, I speak out where I can, where I think my voice matters as a subject matter expert. Other situations, I listen, and I don't just have to preach about it. Okay. Now, what I'm telling you about right here is that we have an opportunity to discuss what I think most people are in the space for, which is financial related, Bitcoin related, opportunities for people in the United States and even outside the United States. But if you want to derail this to a Hamas Israel discussion, fine. I mean, like we can do that. But
No, I just find it implausible that there is a Holocaust going on right now, and your government is the one that's the primary sponsor for it, and no one thinks that it's even worth talking about. I find that inconceivable because
I think because
everyone would have
most of the
talked
world
about
kind
what
of realize it's
Bitcoin
not a
space.
true
What,
Holocaust,
I don't understand.
and you're not on the ground. You don't know what's happening. If
but I do watch every day for 650 days exactly what is happening on the ground, and listen and engage with people that are on the ground right now. Are you doing that?
This
I
has
feel like
become
you
a
need to
crash out now.
have a little joint and some tea and relax.
This is a conversation to have on another space. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying that this is not the audience for
Yeah,
that.
fine. Sorry, I just got a little triggered because I got a DM from somebody around Zach's unequivocal, unconditional support for Israel when they're committing a genocide right now, and it
Is
just
that what I said?
upsets me because I know so many people that are dying because of this crimes against humanity that U.S. companies are profiting from right now.
All right. Okay.
Look, there's a lot of people on each side
There's a lot of
of this
people dying
conflict.
everywhere and getting killed everywhere and starving everywhere and endless wars and just misery. That's just the state of the world. So
Yeah, but who profits from all of them? Who profits from all of them?
Like we have to talk about it for what? So we have to talk
Who
about
profits from all of them?
Okay, the American government profits from it. What are we supposed to do? Just bitch about it on Spaces? What do you mean you want to go
No,
protest?
not just bitch about it from Spaces. Actually follow the money, understand what your government's engaging with.
And then
Stop
what? And then what,
gaslighting
Simon?
people
I've
by
heard you
saying
20 times,
this
I
is the
know.
best country in the world while it commits a Holocaust, and appreciate that you are the ones that could actually do something about the people that are dying right now. It's only Americans that can stop this right now. You're the only ones, and you're ignoring it like a
I
bitch.
thought you said we were powerless to the overall cabal that controls the world.
You're not powerless. Control your money, understand what your government's doing, recognize what you profit from, and fight against your government because people are starving and dying
Okay,
while
most
you're
of us are not going to take
profiting.
up arms against the United States government. I think you may have a skewed
Don't
view of
take up arms
America's role in
against
the
the
world.
United States government, but share yourselves in Lockheed Martin. Share yourselves in Palantir. I heard you, Joe, while you were on a space saying anyone that talks against Palantir is an idiot conspiracy theorist. Do you know what Palantir are doing right now in Gaza? Do you know what they're doing in West Bank right now? Do you know what they are building right now? Do you understand that? And what profit? And if you're profiting from that, Joe, why don't you ask the question? Why do you
I
try
don't.
and discredit someone
Is
that wants
Joe
to talk
profiting from
about
the
it?
military-industrial
Why do
complex in some way?
Simon,
Hey, why do these Bitcoin Spaces all start saying and we're talking about
This
Bitcoin?
is what Bitcoin was
This
created
ball
for.
that
It
is
was created
insane.
to stand up against
It's
the
out of
banks.
control,
It was
man.
created to defund the wars. It was created for this. I know that because I was there and you weren't. I was at those original presentations. I know what we were here for. And if banks want to say, oh, you should put it in BlackRock and make BlackRock more powerful, I have a problem with that. And I would like to communicate why that might not be the best idea for humanity, while you tell me that America's the best country in the world while it's killing and bombing children and starving them.
Okay, you get it all out, Simon.
That's why Bitcoin was created.
Okay, let's talk
And
price
Bitcoin
action.
allows me to boycott the Federal Reserve and the financial terrorists that own all those shares. And Bitcoin allows me to own it in self-custody and not hold it
So
with
if Bitcoin's
BlackRock.
Bitcoin's boycotting this and Bitcoin's preventing all this from happening, then why are you concerned about BlackRock buying Bitcoin, Simon? Why do you care?
I am very concerned about BlackRock buying
Because
Bitcoin, and
maybe
I spend
let me
all
answer the
day.
question directly. Because buying Bitcoin alone doesn't solve all these problems. Is that the real answer?
I wish I could solve all the problems, but if Americans would actually be more conscious with their money and stop buying into the bullshit that your government is
No, the
feeding you,
answer
that
is
you're the
Bitcoin does
greatest
not
country in
solve
the
all these
world while
problems in the
blowing
world.
up children
Bitcoin is
and
a check
committing
on oppressive
genocide.
governments. Bitcoin gives you more power. It's a freedom technology, but it does not solve all the political problems in the world. And
It doesn't solve all the political problems in the world, but if you could stop profiting from genocide and understand and follow the money and stop saying you're a conspiracy theorist, because I actually just happen to notice what corporations are profiting from this genocide and what the incentives are and what the big beautiful bill does and what the CIA's role in this and what Mossad's role and why your presidents are blackmailed and what Epstein is, and you say, don't listen to him, bro. Stop talking about that, bro. It's a Bitcoin conversation. We created Bitcoin in order to stop these crimes against humanity.
I mean, for folks in the audience, I just
Yeah,
want
Joe
to.
said that you wish I shouldn't be
When people
talking.
talk
That
about,
it's
I'm not a
conspiracy
conspiracy
theories.
theorist. I'm just following the
Hey
money. This is
guys,
always how it ends.
hey guys, can I say something, guys?
Go ahead.
All right. Hey guys, this is Salty here. All right. So I was just listening anonymously, and I had to come and just talk. Um, let's respect people' feelings, people what people have to say. Simon's. This is a Bitcoin place, right? I understand that, but Bitcoin is not just about money. It's about fixing a lot of things in the world. So what Simon said is not look, we have to respect what he's trying to fight for, and
We
then
get it,
don't
bro. We get it.
no, I understand. Let me finish, please. Right. So uh I want you, I feel like we're laughing at his feelings, because I think, look guys, people are suffering. If he has a heart for it, we need to support that too. If you don't want to support it, don't say nothing about it. And when it comes to Bitcoin, let's just talk about Bitcoin, but let's respect each other. I see so many disrespect here, and this is not good. We here to listen to you guys, because you guys have something to drop on the table. But let's do it in a respect way,
Salty,
in a respectful way.
I've had many
Okay, on the
conversations with
Bitcoin.
Simon. We have been aggressive in our views, right? But we always have, I think, respect for one another, and I do respect Simon. And I will tell you very clearly, part of my frustration with talking about Simon is what we saw today, where every time I asked him to explain his views, he cites a long treatise and he says, if I haven't read it, I'm an idiot. And he's also said many times that, oh, you have to follow the money, but he can't explain clearly the evidence beyond these banalities and conclusory statements. And that is very frustrating with someone who comes up and says, I've studied this for decades and I understand how the system works, to not be able to explain clearly for folks. And to me, if he truly wants to convince people and win over hearts and minds, he should be able to do that. That shouldn't be that difficult. It shouldn't be like pulling teeth to try to get basic answers to facts. And
But
every time I
Joe,
talk to Simon, that's what I run into.
sometimes you don't give the answer that people want sometimes. Like, let him give. Let's meet people where they are, right? Most of the research Simon does, sometimes they're right. Guys, I do my research too. So again, let's meet people where they are, and same thing for you too. But I think we all should focus on moving forward instead of trying to, make people look bad. And we should not do that. We should do everything with respect.
I think that
And
was
when
Simon that
someone,
was making Simon look
and
bad.
when
That was not
someone,
something Simon
Zach,
did.
please let me finish to talk. Zach, please. So when someone talks, let finish. Let allow that person to say his thing, his word, and then you talk. But always trying to talk back at people to interrupt them. This is just disrespectful. We are Bitcoiners,
There's
guys.
other spaces for it, bro. I mean, we hear it every time it comes up. It ultimately leads to this. It's a
Bro,
Bitcoin space.
Bitcoin
We're
is
not
not just
talking
about
about
money.
this.
Bitcoin
We
is not
get it.
just about money. Bitcoin is not just about money. And I want you guys to understand that. And again, that's the thing. We have this opportunity to do something for the world, to to align all people in thinking, do some great things for the world. All that wealth that get created, guys, is to fix a lot of things that we are against, guys. So Bitcoin is not just about sitting here and making money. So again, anybody
But
with
we don't need anybody to come and force the rules for us and tell us like exactly how we're supposed to speak.
100%.
and I don't think that's what was
Salty,
frustrating here by
salty, salty,
Simon.
salty. One second. Look, we respect everyone's right to an opinion. People have interrupted others on both sides of the aisle. Simon has been talking. Zach has been talking also for quite some time. We just don't think that this is the space for it. There's people suffering in Israel. There's people suffering in Gaza. There's people suffering in Russia. There's
And
people
some have
suffering in
Sahara.
Ukraine. There's people suffering everywhere, my friend. And yeah, we would love to be
And it
able
all
to.
comes back to one country.
I
Oh,
respectfully
bullshit.
disagree. But look,
Bullshit.
Who's
it's
making the
just
money? Who's making the money from all of these wars?
I think
Simon,
it's much more
when you say
complicated than
it
that.
all
Whose
comes
stock
back
prices
to
are going up?
Middle East.
Simon, when you say it all comes back to one country and insist who's making the money, do you understand how that sounds?
Yes. I mean, if you
What
speak
does
to
that
anyone
sound like,
outside of
Simon?
America
What
bubble,
does that sound
it's
like?
just how most of the world think.
Simon,
That would be incredibly sad considering how much money.
It's a GDP print to America. It's a GDP print from money that's being stolen from you to create inflation to the people that don't own the assets, because the only way to profit from it is to own the freaking shares in the same companies that are profiting from all of this stuff. And
It's a
if you haven't figured that out yet, you don't
it's a
understand how
financial
deeply root.
cabal that all comes back to one country that explains all of this. But I promise you, this is nothing anti-Semitic.
So
Simon,
I will
What
end
the
Right,
with
fuck
this.
has this got to
100%.
do with anti-Semitism?
I
Simon,
will
you're
end
a
with this,
European.
Because
guys.
every
You're
day
a
we count.
European. I'm a European. And Simon, let's be fair here.
And our
Before you,
governments are controlled by the
but
same damn companies.
this guy doesn't let anyone speak. You've been speaking, dude. You've been speaking for 2.5 hours. Can you let me finish my sentence, please? You're a European. I'm a European. I now live in the States. Be fair here. If it wasn't for the United States, you would have Putin as your emperor right now. So would I in Ireland. Like, it's not a
Oh
black
my
and
god,
white. It, it's
such a
not a black.
basic understanding of what the CIA did. Go back to the
He's
WikiLeaks. This is why Bitcoin was
he's
created,
interrupting again.
to leak the same documents that will help you understand what
Let
happened
him
in
talk,
Guys,
bro.
2014.
Let him
guys,
talk.
guys, this guy. What is this guy's deal? You know, Simon, you're not doing a very good job of presenting your case, because when someone offers an opinion from the other side, you immediately jump in and shout people down. It's a very fair comment to make that when you're lambasting the United States for being the source of all problems in the world, that I respond to you by saying, not
Or
only did the
wars, or wars, not problems.
not only did the United States save Europe, but the Marshall Plan rebuilt Europe after the war. Be fair. Don't take
Yeah,
out
I
one.
read that history book at school as well. And yeah, if you read the Russian version and the German version, and then compare it to the English version, you'll
You know
realize
what?
all three were propagandized into that belief.
You know what, Simon? You probably spent too much time reading the Russian version.
Making it worse.
Oh yeah, because yeah, okay. So if you just want to get the American version and the PR king capital of the world,
We get it. You really hate
then yeah, you
America.
might think that that's what happened.
So, Simon, you mentioned before that Bitcoin was created for stuff like WikiLeaks. I'm curious if you've read what Satoshi said about WikiLeaks.
Yeah, he didn't. I didn't say it was created for WikiLeaks. I said it was us versus the bank. I was at that very first Bitcoin presentation when it was a group of activists, and we were trying to figure out how to transact, have money we can own, money we can spend, and a money that could combat the Federal Reserve and its monetary policy.
Satoshi in favor
Yes,
of
I've read
WikiLeaks,
what
not in favor
Satoshi
of
said.
WikiLeaks.
Zach, I didn't need to go back in history because I was there. I know you have to go
So I'm
back
just
and
asking
study
you.
it.
You were there.
But yeah,
You
I
were there.
heard.
What did Satoshi say about WikiLeaks?
He said we weren't ready for it yet. It's not ready to scale.
Is that what he said?
Yep.
I think he said that he discouraged people from using Bitcoin for WikiLeaks because he thought it would look bad for Bitcoin, and Bitcoin wasn't at that time ready for that type of scrutiny.
Yeah, it would create unnecessary attention and it wasn't ready for scaling. I remember the debates. Like, you can go back in history and look for it, Zach, but yeah. But Bitcoin was created as an us versus banks mission. And if you want to hold your money with banks and you want to make people, this is the antithesis for what we were created for. Now, I know that eventually banks are going to hold it and they want you all to they'll tax incentivize you to own it with BlackRock, and you'll make the banks and financial institutions more powerful. But I would like people to understand where we came from and what we can do with Bitcoin, and then you can make the decision. But don't make that decision based upon a false fairy tale history book that you were defending democracy and you're not funding all these terrorist groups like ISIS and Al Qaeda, and you're not committing the genocide in Gaza right now. And I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the power structure in America that I would like people to at least try and understand. Because guess what? Trump's not in charge. Biden wasn't in charge. Obama wasn't in charge. There is a power structure that benefits from propping up the dollar with war, death, destruction, and violence. And yes, you inherited it from the British Empire. And yes, we talk about our evil empire, but we don't call ourselves the greatest country in the world while we're committing a Holocaust in plain sight on 4D
Specifically, just
camera.
on the WikiLeaks point, I think it was one of Satoshi's last posts where he talked about doing business with WikiLeaks is quote kicking the hornet's nest. But the other thing I want to go back to is something you said a few minutes ago about the Marshall Plan, which was brought up, right? Which is often cited as benevolence in the United States. We helped rebuild war-torn Europe. Yes, it was in our economic interest to have trading partners, but also it helped a lot of people not starve. It helped bootstrap the economy. And you said instead of reading the I don't know if you call it fake history or whatever that is taught in American schools, you said we should read at the time the Russian would have been the Soviet version of the history, the Soviet Union, of course,
I
being a
said,
totalitarian nation under Stalin at that point.
no,
Is your view
I
that
said, okay, yeah,
Stalin's
yeah, you can
propaganda books are better
trust
than we
America.
have?
They told you the truth about COVID, right?
You're
No,
choosing
that's not what I
Stalin's
said.
worldview?
What?
You're just an
Jack,
America
Zach,
hater. You're an
Zach,
anti-American
Zach.
ideologue.
Shut up, Zach. Right.
Here we go.
I
Shut up.
said, if you
Yeah,
want to
that's how you
understand,
debate.
if you want to understand, if you want to understand the truth, take the American version of events, the
Here we go.
Western
I now
version
need
of
to read
events.
some
Take,
esoteric thing, or else I don't know what I'm talking about.
yeah, but then also take the other side of the events, and you'll get to what you believe to be the truth. But believe me, everything you were told in your history books was designed to make you act a certain way
As
and
opposed to
become a good
what
person for the
Stalin's
system,
Soviet
just like
Russia
you are, Zach.
that wasn't designed to make anyone think
I'm
anything.
not saying that they don't engage in propaganda, but what you don't understand is the US government engages in
Equally
equal
bad propaganda
propaganda.
to Stalin's Soviet Union. That's where we are in America
Absolutely,
right now.
yes.
Yes. Okay.
Absolutely, yes. And if you can't look through every single war
As
that's
someone
happened
who's
over the
really
last
worried about
100 years
spooks,
and
do you,
understand America's role in it, then you have you've drank the Kool-Aid, and that's what is making you.
I am not going to allow this space to turn into an anti-American propaganda space, guys. I'm sorry. It's just not gonna happen. Not here. So we're gonna have to talk about something else. Let's talk Bitcoin. Let's talk markets. Let's talk anything. I'm just not gonna allow that. I'm sorry.